Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1382 of the War News stream. And we have very big news yet again today. We have seen today that Russia has devastated their own city in Belgorod. They gave it a slammy in a major explosive accident. Also, Ukraine has struck Crimea this evening with Neptune missiles, causing significant damage there as well. And also, Chernobyl has been compromised, according to reports, after the drone strikes occurred a few weeks back. And apparently, there is an issue with the containment structure, which is critical. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, but most importantly from Ukraine over the course of the day, as significant news has emerged that Ukrainian armed forces have conducted a Special Operations Forces raid in the city of Skadovsk, which is about 50 miles away from the active front line along the banks of the Dnipro River near to the city of Kherson. This is one of the deepest range strikes that we've seen by Ukrainian special forces in recent times, and according to information that is being given by Ukrainian intelligence, it does appear that one of the commanders involved in the strike on the Russian side may have actually been killed, leading to one of the highest level officers and generals of the conflict so far to have been killed in Skadovsk, with the name of that general soon to be released according to the Ukrainian armed forces. Nevertheless, we have also been able to hear other major news that at the same time, Ramzan Kadyrov has declared that the Ukrainians did learn of Russian vengeance, or specifically Chechen vengeance, last night after the strike that appeared to have hit a Chechen skyscraper within the city of Grozny, the capital of the Chechen semi-autonomous republic. After that statement was made, it turns out that the Russians actually bombed Belgorod, making it a little bit unclear as to whether or not that was the Chechen response to the Ukrainians bombing Grozny, was that the Chechens bombed the Russians. It's a little bit unclear at the moment, and all jokes aside, it actually was the Russian Air Force that dropped a Fab 500 directly onto an electrical substation of the city of Belgorod, causing a power blackout that is now still ongoing at the moment for hours now for tens of thousands of people within the city of Belgorod. Not only that, we have also seen that Ukrainian armed forces were able to land some more significant hits inside the area of Saratov and Ingles, with a possible hit directly on the refinery and some other critical industry across the Volga River inside of Ingles. Meanwhile, we have also heard that apparently a large amount of Russians are beginning to notice that their countrymen are becoming thinner and thinner, at least in number, in a larger way. Many Russian bloggers are starting to state that there are a lot of people that are apparently not ethnically Russian that are starting to appear in the streets by the hundreds of thousands, as a matter of fact, and it appears that they're quite literally just replacing their brethren who heroically went off to go and fight in the invasion of Ukraine in honor of the Russian Federation and the glorious Vladimir Putin, largely letting us understand that the Russian Federation is taking such significant losses that the Russian government's new objective is to replace those who have been killed so far in the invasion of Ukraine with foreigners, just quite literally importing immigrants to replace the Russians that have been killed inside of Ukraine, which appears to be so prevalent that it's now being mentioned by dozens of people over the course of this day in Russia, of course military bloggers from the region who are talking about this very matter, and also the growing cemeteries simultaneously. Also, we've been able to hear that the Republic of India appears to be now flagrantly violating U.S. sanctions, as they have now stated, along with Vladimir Putin today, that they will continue their purchases of the Russian Federation's oils and natural gases and will not stop anytime in the foreseeable future. Once again, making it incredibly clear that the Republic of India is apparently going dead on into the BRICS alliance once more. Outside of that, the People's Republic of China has also continued their large deployment of ships throughout the entirety of their surrounding seas, of the Yellow Sea, the East China Sea, and the South China Sea, with around 90 to 100 vessels comprised of the People's Liberation Army Navy and the China Coast Guard currently in the area at this moment. Meanwhile, we have also seen that the Israelis have dealt with an incredibly odd incident today where some sort of a civilian inside of the area of the West Bank has run directly at full speed into an Israeli checkpoint, leading to a small clash at that time, which was then quickly subsided. But an incredibly odd incident to say the least. Additionally, the Sudanese government forces have struck and destroyed a SDF or an RSF convoy that was attempting to cross the border into Chad, apparently to pick up supplies from inside of that country. Once again showing that the conflict generally is spilling well beyond Sudan's borders and reaching the surrounding countries, including that of Chad. Additionally, we've also heard that the USS Gerald R Ford in the Eastern Caribbean is now underway at the moment, as it was seen on camera today in the U.S. Virgin Islands, departing its anchorage, and we have also heard additional details that according to the admiral in charge of the operations, General Bradley, who was in charge of the strike that was conducted on September 2nd, which is now a quadruple tap, against a supposed or alleged narco-terrorist boat, actually stated that the vessel's path was not in line to a path that was heading towards the United States or any other countries that would serve as a distribution point to reach the United States. Meanwhile, the United States of America has also stopped and seized a narco-terrorist vessel today within the Eastern Pacific with around 20,000 pounds of contraband on board of a wide variety of different sorts of illegal substances. Additionally, within Europe, we have also heard that the main European leaders are now stating that the Russians appear quite clearly locked in to escalatory steps, and Emmanuel Macron has made it clear that multiple top European leaders, including that of the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and Ukraine, will be meeting in London on Monday to discuss significant security matters and developments that are once again plaguing the region and are continuing to cause significant concern. Meanwhile, we've also heard that the Swedish Navy has stated that Russian submarine sightings in the Baltic are becoming wildly prevalent and very common, which is incredibly concerning not only to the Swedes, but to the surrounding regional stability of the NATO alliance, considering that a large amount of NATO states are within these seas. It is something of a pressing concern. Additionally, the Ukrainian armed forces have held their ground today and have still inflicted even heavier casualties onto the Russian Federation's armed forces. Although, unfortunately, some very concerning news has come out today. According to the IAEA chief Grossi, he has stated that the Chernobyl new safe containment system has actually been breached. That is the system that you can see right here from a Russian drone attack that was conducted months prior, and it does actually appear that the leakage of radiation out of the containment vessel is still ongoing at the moment, and it does appear that the vessel will now be degrading due to the damage that was caused from the prior attack, giving us an incredibly concerning situation that is currently happening at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, once again caused by Russian direct involvement. But with that in mind, folks, we are going to be covering each and every single major piece of news that we have over the course of the day. And of course, folks, you all know it is by tradition we start with the largest stories first and then work our stories on into the smaller ones through the night. And of course, folks, without any further ado, we're going to be getting right into those significant stories, starting off with those inside of Ukraine, and particularly the one that happened down at Skadovsk today. Skadovsk is a town that has been mentioned seldom here on the channel. It's about 35 miles away from the active front line near to the city of Kherson and the Dnipro River, but most importantly, this town is in a fairly difficult to reach location, at least by sea. Considering that this town is actually within the Zherlitskaya Gulf, or however you would pronounce that, which it's far beyond my abilities in Ukrainian to be able to pronounce the name of that gulf, the city of Skadovsk is a somewhat smaller port, which hardly sees any realistic operations at this point in the war, rather than military resupply or being used as an anchorage for fishing vessels. The city of Skadovsk still serves an important role for the Russian air defenses that attempt to try and protect Crimea as a first line of defense within this area, and also as a staging for Russian armed forces that are attempting to move up onto the line in rotations to replace other Russian forces that have been on the line for an incredibly long time along the Dnipro River. Due to the current Ukrainian drone tactics, the front line, or no man's land as it's usually called by a large amount of people, has actually extended significantly in both directions of the line, usually expanding about 15 to 20 miles behind the active quote-unquote front line that exists inside of Ukraine. This means that Russian forces, to be safe at their staging areas, have to stage even farther away from the front lines now than they would have in any other point in history. And for this reason, the city of Skadovsk finds itself to be an incredibly important position for the Russian Federation's armed forces that are heading to Oleski and Oleprostan, and even for the forces that are rotating out. Every single one of these units will either come in from Crimea or from the land bridge and base at Skadovsk, and then make their way up to Oleprostan and Oleski, relieving the brigade or regiment that the Russians have within that area, with that regiment then retiring and then backing off of the line, regrouping at Skadovsk, and then leaving in an organized fashion out of the area. This means that Skadovsk is quite a significant sort of a target to be able to hit, especially on the tactical level of the frontline situation that exists around the area of the city of Kherson. Now, interestingly enough, Skadovsk has a little bit of a natural barrier, which is this small little spit right here, a lot like the Kenburn spit, which is right out here. This makes it somewhat difficult for forces to be able to get in here, because there's quite literally a natural barrier sitting right in front of the city. You would have to take a boat all the way from the Ukrainian coastline, either at Odessa or Mykolaiv, past the entire coastline, then practically thread the needle between Crimea and this area of this spit, trying to avoid Russian reconnaissance in both areas, to then scoot around, of course using a motor-powered boat, which is quite loud, to then make it into this gulf, and then straight to Skadovsk, to be able to conduct any sort of a raid. Of course, you can drop off forces a couple of miles out, so that way they're literally not being dropped off in the middle of the Russians, but still, this is quite a significant sort of a feat. The only way that this would be possible is either through unbelievable amounts of stealth and pre-planning due to advanced reconnaissance, or the complete lack of Russian reconnaissance to be able to detect your movements in the area. Whichever way that goes, it appears that one of those, or both of those, was true, as Ukrainian special forces not only were able to land on the shores near to the town of Skadovsk, but actually conducted a significant raid within the city itself against Russian top commanders in charge of one of the regiments that was either rotating into the front or out of the front during that period of time. Video footage emerged of the special forces attacks on the units that was published by the Ukrainian intelligence services, which generally operate in conjunction with the SOF forces of the Ukrainian army to be able to try and conduct these sorts of high-level attacks and precision attacks to cause as much damage to the Russian command as possible. And we can see in this clip right here, the beginning of the clip starts with one of these soldiers holding a camera or having a helmet-mounted cam showing us what they're looking at. From what we understand, this is directly within the city of Skadovsk itself. So the Ukrainians dropped off their team somewhere off in the coastline, probably a couple of miles away. They then just walked through the tree lines into the city, made it into the city where their target was supposed to be, set up, and then conducted the attack. All without being detected, and also exfiltrated without being detected either.
Must be very, very little defenses around Skadovsk, or at least anybody paying attention, for the Ukrainians literally just to go in there and get in.
Yeah, it really is something, honestly. I mean, it is unbelievable. And there we have, right here, one of the vehicles that we believe is being used by one of the top Russian commanders of this regiment, which means it's a regimental commander, inside of his vehicle. We can also see him being followed by a couple of others as well, which may be his command staff that are following with him, or possibly some sort of a detachment of HQ staff. But when you see them now,
This is what they give their top level people is like blacked out Ladas.
Yeah.
Wow,
it-
it's not very good.
it's not really the best sort of, it's not a Bentley or anything like that. Not that any U.S. commanders get that either. But we can see them rolling around the building, just merrily on their way.
That's crazy. I have no idea that there's a monster out here in the bushes staring them down and filming them the whole time.
And we can also see the vehicles now moving down the street over here, and now they're popping up in the open again, and right here, there goes the commander. The entire regimental commander, from what we understand, apparently was killed in this attack, from what we're hearing so far, in the explosion that happened right here. You can actually see the roof go flying off, giving you an idea of the force. After this attack,
damn, that Lada didn't hold up very well. I wouldn't say it held up good at all, actually.
Honestly, man, I'd say that it was held up with a whole lot of glue, at least before the explosion. After that, the Ukrainian intelligence, actually the Ukrainian SOF forces, which were supported by the intelligence service, then retrograded out of the city, which means that they retreated out of the city, to their extraction point, meaning that they exfiltrated, they got on their boats, and then they left. Apparently, the entire time, no joke, without any sort of detection happening at all from the Russians. So this entire Special Forces team made it in and made it out while striking their target, while taking absolutely no injuries or deaths in the process of this strike from what we understand so far. Additional information did emerge afterwards, which is where we are getting the information that apparently a regimental commander was killed, that is being acclaimed online by multiple sources that a high-ranking Russian military official may have been targeted within the course of the strike. Considering that Skadovsk has been used historically throughout the entire war, and especially in modern times as a rotational point for units rotating in and out of the front, we would assume that a high level of officer within this area would most likely be the regimental commander of one of these mechanized or motorized units that's moving up into the line into this area, or it may have been the regimental commander of an air defense battery that was also based out of the city of Skadovsk, considering that that is historically fairly common as well. Either way, it was a fairly important kill, and it is one that is showing us that the Ukrainian armed forces, and the Ukrainian special forces for that matter, are either some of the stealthiest special forces on the planet, considering that they were able to make it 35 miles behind the lines, apparently by boat, to be able to conduct this attack. They're literally threading a gauntlet to make it into this area in the first place to drop anyone off, or the Russians have quite truly no reconnaissance in this area along the entirety of the Tendrivska Gulf and also around the area of the Zarlachka Gulf either, which is apparently the one that's here near the area of Skadovsk. And this means that Ukrainian armed forces, or at least Ukrainian special forces for that matter, could conduct pretty deadly and significant raids in an indefinite period of time right now until the Russians reinforce this area with additional manpower and troops that could be used in other fronts. So at the moment, this appears to be quite a significant gap, either in Russian reconnaissance and defense abilities around this area, or it is showing that the Ukrainian special forces are competent enough of a force that they can conduct strikes quite literally just about anywhere inside of the occupied regions of Ukraine, especially around the areas of the northern shores of the Crimean Peninsula and around the area leading west towards the Kinburn Spit. Either way, the strike was wildly significant, and it does show us that the Ukrainian special forces are quite truly on another level. Speaking of special forces, or more so special actions that have been conducted by the Ukrainians recently, we do have to mention that the Russians have their own amounts of special forces that are wildly competent and incredibly capable at what they do as well. The world shivers when an Iceman loses his cool. That's at least what cringe Redditors will tell you online. But what the Chechen Redditors will tell you online is that a Ukrainian shivers when a fat Chechen loses his cool. And they're actually talking about Ramzan Kadyrov inside of the capital of Grozny, of the Chechen Semi-Autonomous Republic. Many of y'all will remember that the ham and cheddar man from his palace, while he's suffering apparently from liver cirrhosis or something along those lines, made the statement yesterday that the Ukrainians are deeply going to regret what they did to their precious skyscraper just about a mile away from the presidential palace right down here that was apparently hit by a Ukrainian drone that was intercepted by electronic warfare interference and then errantly flew into the building and exploded. Ramzan Kadyrov did pledge, just to remind everyone yesterday, that there will be vengeance by the Chechens and the Chechen government against the Ukrainians for such an act, and the Ukrainians would shiver when a fat Chechen loses his cool. And it appears that it wasn't really the Ukrainians that were shivering, it was more so the Russians themselves, as right around the same time that that statement was made, no joke at all, Belgorod got bombed by the Russians. I'm not even kidding. The city of Belgorod in Russia was bombed by Russia around the exact same time that Kadyrov published the statement today, well, actually, as a matter of fact, today, that the Ukrainians have now learned their lesson. Now, let me make sure to get this one for y'all because I don't want to skip this here. Also, now that is one hell of a picture right down there below this one, man. That's how he looks when he sees a ham and cheddar.
I tell you what, he is mean mugging something. There's either a ham and cheddar sandwich behind the screen, or he's maybe looking at his good buddy Putin could be behind the screen. You never can tell, but he's looking fondly at something.
Man, he's sitting down there in that bottom picture. He's going, Don, are you going to eat that, Don? Man, that's like, damn, bro. But beyond that, he has stated that our response to the strike on Grozny was immediate. In Ukraine, this night is being called hellish, but this is not the limit. The attacks will continue. He made that statement at the same time that Belgorod got slammed by what we understand to be a Fab 500, with this clip showing here the Russian police having to cordon off the surrounding area around the crater that was caused by the Russian bombing in their own city that knocked down an entire substation and plunged tens of thousands of people in the city of Belgorod into a blackout as a result.
I bet the Russians are probably more concerned with preventing people from filming this whole scene right here because it's so embarrassing than actually, like, you know, seeing what went wrong.
I think so, honestly. And I mean, the
They
debris
devastated it.
Yeah, the debris went over a wide area of the road. I mean, they're going to have a lot to clean up there for sure from that explosion. And it does appear that this is not the first time, and it has not been the last time, that the Russians are going to bomb one of their own cities. They're actually quite well known for bombing their cities, especially over the war, and Belgorod has probably been the one to receive the most bombs over the course of it. This one is, of course, the newest one, and it did appear to be a Fab 500 that has practically leveled an entire electrical substation within the western side of the city. A lot of people are talking about this, and a lot of people are wondering, why in the world did this happen? And I'm going to give y'all some of the reasons why that this has happened in the past, at least according to what the Russians have been able to deduce as the reason, and then published publicly for everyone to know. The aircraft was not maintained properly, so the bomb loading rack was actually faulty wired, and it actually was wired to drop the bomb prematurely, and so it would drop on accident over the city, or the pilot mistook Belgorod for Kharkiv or some other large city in Ukraine, and he dropped the bomb on them thinking that it was the city of Kharkiv, or there was just generally an accident along some lines, and whoop-de-doop-de, the bomb was just dropped, like someone accidentally dropped the bomb, and about a million other excuses have been given by the Russians as to the reasons why the bombs keep dropping on Belgorod. And I gotta say, Matthew, that's a quite bit different than the stars falling on Alabama, is the bombs falling on Belgorod. Man, you know, in Belgorod, man, I actually heard that they have a license plate in Belgorod, and it has, like, a whole bunch of bombs, like, coming down from the sky like comets, and then it says on the motto of the license plate, it says bombs fell on Belgorod. But beyond that, what are people thinking about it, Matthew? What are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so we did see that obviously the Russians dropped a 1,000-pounder on Belgorod, which is their own city. And also, Belgorod's been getting slammed by the Ukrainians for a very long time. So Belgorod's like the punching bag of the Ukrainians, and now occasionally the Russians too when they do an incompetent action like this. And it caused massive damage. It knocked out a substation. It cut power off to a large part of the city. So the Russians did a doozy on Belgorod today, which is kind of crazy to see that. But 62% said it's completely incompetent, while 20% said, it happens from time to time, accidents do happen, and 14% said it's karma for Kadyrov's threat that he recently made, which is really bad timing for that threat that Kadyrov made, because it looks like the Russians kind of got slammed themselves, like Kadyrov was threatening to do to Zelensky in Ukraine, basically. So I would say it's completely incompetent. This is very incompetent. I'm with the enforcer. I'm not really sure what the actual mistake was. It could have been maybe they were going for a different city and they mistook this city for a different one, maybe. It could be that bad. But remember, though, this is just one of a long series of incompetent things that Russia's been doing. Remember during the attack we saw about 5 or 6 days ago that Ukraine launched on Russia, all the Russian air defense missiles started malfunctioning over several different cities and started slamming right into residential buildings and hitting basically apartments. And that was the Russians' missiles that tore their own cities up. So these days, it seems like Russia is doing at least some of the heavy lifting for Ukraine, actually, when it comes to striking their own cities through these air defense malfunctions. Also, the Russian jets dropping bombs in the wrong places. It's getting really, really bad. It makes you wonder what's wrong with their training. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd just say it's pure incompetence, either due to the ground crews and the lack of maintenance on the aircraft, or the pilot's incompetence, one or the other. It's most likely going to end up becoming one of those two. The fact that it dropped on an electrical substation, though, kind of leads me to believe that there was a little bit of a deliberate targeting going on with this, because usually in the past they either dropped in kind of fields or directly within a suburban or an urban area. Well, you've never seen one drop on what would quite literally be a strategic energy target. And so I would actually believe that this may have been, although I wouldn't know how they do it at night, a deliberate targeting of the electric substation, possibly, because the odds of it slamming down into that is quite low. I mean, out of everything it could have landed at in the surrounding area, it landed smack dab in the middle of an electrical substation. Now, it can happen, like, statistically, that would be next to impossible for that to happen without it being a deliberate action. But it can happen, and this might be one of those freak instances. But nevertheless, either way, this is some sort of incompetence, either by the deliberate dropping of the bomb on the substation by the Russian pilot, or the complete lack of maintenance that led to the bomb just falling right off the pylon, like meat coming right off the bone, and then slamming right down into the substation. But don't worry, folks.
I'll tell you, that meat came schmoove off the bone right there. Schmoove off the bone straight onto the Russians' heads, basically, at the substation. But also, by the way, I wanted to address something. Martin McKernan in the live chat, he said, isn't this the third time that the Russians have bombed Belgorod? And yeah, this is not the first time this has happened, by the way. The Russians have accidentally bombed Belgorod several times, actually, in the past. I can't remember the exact number, but it's been several times. I don't think they hit a substation last time. This is much worse. They've actually hit electrical infrastructure this time, which devastated the electrical grid across the city. And also, I'm not sure if it caused any casualties or not. We don't have that information yet. But the Russians have done this before. So I don't know why Belgorod is a place where they get mixed up really bad quite often like this, but it's something that's occurred before.
I would have to say it definitely has, and we've talked about it many times on this channel. This is just the most recent one. But don't worry, folks. If you think that Belgorod's any worse for wear from this bombing, I can assure you that it's not. Belgorod is honestly getting something of a improvement compared to what it normally looks like. You want to see what Belgorod actually looks like? I'll give you a look right here. This is what Belgorod actually looks like.
Damn, that's honestly, there's not much there, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm saying it's like the odds of this landing on a substation out of everything it could not have landed on, it's quite odd. It's incredibly odd that it seems to have landed right on one of the most important targets that could have been hit within the area. But this is what Belgorod looks like, folks. This is actually what Russia looks like, by the way. I didn't pick this spot out pre-picked. This is just a random dropping, because we already know where in the world Belgorod is in the Russian Federation. It's a fairly middle-of-the-run city, and what it's going to look like on the ground. And I could repeat this quite literally anywhere, like right down here. And y'all are pretty much going to see the exact same thing, just about, maybe even slightly worse. But this is what Russia looks like. So honestly, bombing something like this, you can't really end up with a worse result. It usually ends up looking a little bit better. Also on top of that, there's the possibility they might be able to rebuild the area, considering that it already looks like a war-torn shithole, and it's never even been in a war for about 70 or 80 years. Really more so 80 at this point. But anyways,
the wild part is there's such little actual development or actual properly developed city areas inside of Belgorod that there's only one type of warfare that could actually occur here, which would be a scorched earth, because there's pretty much only dirt out there. There's no real paved roads. There's just houses occasionally spread out across the area. There's dirt roads obviously, and then there's fields for farming or having animals or something. So honestly, man, it's scorched earth is the only thing Belgorod will ever see.
But Matthew, they have the one most important thing, the century-old oak.
Oh, wow, look at that.
And also this church.
Oh, a fake thing.
And then they have goats running. Wow, I got to tell y'all, folks, they are really forward-thinking out here in Russia. They use the public parks as grazing fields for the goats. Now, that is truly first world, folks. I mean, America's what? about 120 years beyond this, like ahead of this. The last time we ever had wild livestock, or more so livestock just wildly roaming through parks, would have been about 120 years ago, actually. So a little bit wild with that. And we also got the stoner bear family out here in the Century Old Oak Park.
Man, why do those bears look like they're standing up? You know how people get in like a fighting stance when they're about to like throw down or something? That bear in the middle looks like he's about to throw down with somebody.
Man, what you want? Man, I'm about to beat your ass.
He's got the throw down. He's about to throw hands. I tell you, that's a crazy bear.
Also, folks, mad respect to the Russian government for chopping off limbs of the century-old oak at random for no real reason.
Oh boy, they said, yeah, screw you, century oak.
Man, they said, century oak, more like $century in my wallet. Man, like it started sawing stuff off. But anyways, as you can see, Belgorod would be no worse for wherever that bomb dropped. Not really that good of a place. Anyways, we did get to see that the Russians are dealing with not so great things in other forms, in other ways, in other places, in other regions of their country. As we have heard over the course of the day that the area of Saratov and Ingles came under drone attack last night by the armed forces of Ukraine. And I'm sure many of y'all know how that went. It, of course, went poorly for the Russians. Now, Saratov and Ingles is actually something of a special sort of a location in Russia, because it's basically a 2-in-1 city. It's a buy one, get one free, even if you don't want the second one. Ingles is basically a suburb of Saratov, and so the Ingles air base is more so pretty much an air base of Saratov, but technically they're two separate cities divided by the Volga River. And the Volga River, at least within this area, is pretty damn wide. It's about 1.5 miles across, so not a small river by any means. But outside of that little fun fact, we did get to see that the Ukrainians were flying some drones over the area, of course recreationally. We thank the squeaker for his coverage. He's like, the building's on fire over there.
It's flashing hard.
That lets us know it is on fire. He opened the window to hear.
Oh my god. Okay. Oh my god. That was a jump scare and a half right there. It went from the squeaker narrating every single little thing like the window opening to just a crazy mosquito going through the sky.
Bro, Blood said, let me open the window. Yeah, man. It's like,
it's like the Stukas are flying past. It's like, damn.
Oh my god.
That's an unusual sounding one too. Like usually it sound a lot less high pitched than that. That one's booking it.
Man, bro, this thing is busting. Man, it's trying to get to that refinery as quick as it can. I said it was coming. Out. Oh, man. Dad got a message about going to get milk from the store. He said he hasn't come back in 3 years. What is this person?
This person's got a
saying?
foul mouth, man. This person is foul. I mean, they're saying every nasty word you can possibly say.
Man, this is so nasty that even Diddy had to look away, and that's pretty bad.
They're coming from angles.
Well, right now there'd be such a big, healthy bag. We're out getting that bag. Like at 12 o'clock at night, we're getting a big, healthy bag of cash. No joke. On God. Oh, air defense fire. They coming. Oh, effing myself. Hey, yo? Like, what the hell's
What is wrong with the
these
people in this place?
Bro.
I mean, these people have problems in Saratov.
Bro, this guy's like, oh my god, the drone's coming. Effing myself. Effing. It's like, yo, calm down. It's like, calm down. No reason to do that.
Yeah, like Michael Jackson said, why you gotta make it so sexual?
Man, I'm not even doing that. They doing that. Oh, and the air defense fire. Here, Tracer looks red. These lights look. Man, these guys, they are poets, really, with how they speak the Russian language. Here they are tracer effing. What the hell is going on? No, what is up with this? Yes, something passed. Yes, he will fall now already. They missed him. It means the rocket will come.
Хуй.
Missed.
Во, пошли по этой стороне. Он, видать, это. Ага, все, попали.
This guy right here is like he's the street expert. He knows everything about air defense. He knows so much about it that he's on the street commenting on it and filming it with a cell phone.
Man, he's truly a genius at this whole thing. I gotta say, folks, apparently in Russia, while they don't really celebrate Christmas the way we do, with the amount of times they said the word effing this and effing that, you know, the rocket effing and all that, I mean, it's the season of giving over there, but they ain't giving out presents under the Christmas tree, if you know what I mean. But we also did get to see that the refinery on the southern side of Saratov was also hit as well. That's from the Squeaker, by the way. That was the clip that was showing the fire at the refinery, from what we understand. We also were able to see a little bit of an attack going on Ingalls over here.
Was it the air base that got hit? Because I was trying to figure that out earlier, but I couldn't see much information about it.
No, because there's apartment buildings over there, so
okay.
It wouldn't be the air base. It was something nearby to it, because I believe that the built-up area, the built-up area does almost get all the way to the air base, but the explosion was somewhere within the region of the built-up building, so not directly on the air base, but got quite close to it.
Interesting. Yeah, because it seems like Ingalls is usually like a favorite target of the Ukrainians when they strike this area, because obviously it's like literally right there next to downtown. So it's not that much farther to send a drone to it. But I didn't see any information confirming that was hit. So I guess they were targeting the refinery and other targets instead of the airfield.
I would suppose so, man. But, you know, in Russia, man, they're doing so bad. The economy is so bad in Russia, man. They can't buy normal Zen. They have to buy Tenzin from the Tenzin army.
Honestly, that sounds not very Russian for some reason.
This is a national forest in Russia, mind you all. This is what we would call a public park in Alabama. This is not a national forest. Like, this shouldn't What the hell? Is that the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car?
I guess.
Man, they're kind of busted up here. And outside of that, though, the city was hit by drone attacks overnight, and it does appear that there was some damage as a result. We're going to be moving on out of the just freak show of Saratov and Ingalls at this point, and we're going to be moving on and on out of Russia, at least for a minute, to start talking about some international topics that we have for tonight, and they're actually some fairly interesting ones. For one, we were able to see that the great and incredible Ian Ellis on Twitter was able to make another great infographic, this time for the deployment of the Chinese Navy and Coast Guard vessels that are currently quite literally everywhere around the area of their seas. So, let's take a little look at what we have here. First, the Liaoning and the Shandong, which are their only operational carriers at the moment, are both underway at this time, with the Liaoning being deployed in the Yellow Sea and the Shandong in the South China Sea. We also understand that there is a large number of surveillance ships that are currently practically everywhere within the Western Pacific, well beyond the island defense chain, mind you all. We also understand that the Hainan Amphibious Task Group is also getting somewhat closer to Guam at the moment. It's at least 1,200 miles away right now. We also see that there are other active ships that are currently deployed within the area of the East China Sea and also the South China Sea, along with Task Force 47 around the Strait of Malacca, and also Task Group 989, also incredibly close to the Strait of Malacca. Now, this is quite interesting as far as the deployment goes, because this one is not directly related to Taiwan, and this is actually a practical front-wide deployment as far as the Chinese Navy could be concerned, as all theater commands and the navies under their command in this area, the Southern Command, the Eastern Command, and also the Northern Command, have all pre-deployed their naval forces generally within the area and have them out at sea at the moment. It's quite interesting to note, folks, that the Strait of Malacca has a large amount of concentrated forces near it, considering that that would be the only place right now that a Chinese submarine could attempt to break through and make it into the greater Western Pacific without facing at least pre-built Western defenses within that area. This would actually show us that if the Chinese start a larger war with Taiwan, they may attempt to send a larger amount of naval forces pre-positioned into the Strait of Malacca to be able to try and meet the U.S. Navy at the head, at least the surface fleet there, and buy time for the Chinese submarines to make their way through the Strait of Malacca and into the open Pacific, where they'll be able to wreak havoc on global shipping, or at least Western shipping, in the advent of a war. Also, interestingly enough, they also have their carriers, both the Shandong and the Liaoning, pre-deployed in position to be able to not only engage the United States in the South China Sea and our allies, but to also engage the U.S. forces and also allied forces that will be in South Korea and Japan, and to also possibly extend some form of air cover to the north and south of the island of Taiwan, while the People's Liberation Army Air Force on land would most likely be the primary force conducting strikes and air interdiction and attempted air superiority operations over Taiwan. They also have a large amount of surveillance ships pre-positioned to the east ahead of all of their actual combatant forces, and what it appears to be is some sort of a forward reconnaissance role to be able to try and gather any information that they can on possible vessels of the United States Navy or any other allied navies that may be trying to make it near to their larger operational fleet that is in the area at the moment. So generally, from what I can tell y'all folks, this is not at all geared towards Taiwan or even Japan. This appears to be geared towards the entire Western Alliance in the entire region, more so than anyone in particular, which is starting to show, at least as far as operational abilities are concerned, a far more aggressive posturing from the People's Republic of China than we've ever seen in the past. The most aggressive posturing that we've seen within recent times would be limited deployments of Chinese vessels into the South China Sea to attempt to exert their illegal claims of sovereignty over the waters within that region, and also the joint sword exercises that were conducted by the People's Liberation Army Navy and People's Liberation Army Air Force around the area of the island of Taiwan. This has never been seen before, at least in recent years, such a large deployment like this, and it is leading me to believe that they're trying to figure out and map out exactly how to pre-deploy their naval forces, so when they attempt to conduct an invasion of Taiwan or a larger war with the West, they will be ready and already have the knowledge and know-how to be able to pull this off successfully from the very start. So with that in mind, I hope we are able to address this topic well, and a big shout out to Ian Ellis for always making these incredible infographics. They are an incredibly important service, not only to us on the channel, but to hundreds of thousands of people out there around the world who get access to these maps and get to look at them and have a much better understanding of exactly where all of these forces are when they are laid out on a map. And I also like maps. I think maps are just the greatest. But anyways, moving on out of that, we have also been able to hear news out of the Republic of India today. And I gotta say, Republic of India, or more like the dictatorship of India? Oh, I don't know, folks. I gotta tell y'all, India is not going to be our friend any longer. I can tell you on that for sure. Any attempt to do that would just be pointless. We have been able to hear out of India today that India is apparently just going to start ignoring sanctions. According to information that we have been able to get today, Putin is to provide a steady and constant supply of Russian oil to India. This basically means that they are not going to be adhering to sanctions whatsoever in India. India is going to completely violate and ignore the U.S. sanctions that have been put against the Russian Federation and continue to purchase Russian oil at normal volumes. That also means that the Russian Federation, and the kind of economic situation that we've been seeing recently that will lead to an apocalyptic scenario in an incredibly short amount of time, may be stymied and may take a little bit longer for them to go into a complete economic collapse. So it does appear that at the moment, the Republic of India is pretty much giving the Russian Federation a lifeline, and for that reason, also for the fact that they are aligning themselves with the Chinese, we need to start clearly viewing the Republic of India as an open adversary to the United States of America and our strategic interests globally. Not only that, the entirety of the Western Alliance should view them similarly, and should heavily discourage any capitalist ventures or expenditures within the Republic of India to build up their industrial base or to offshore our manufacturing into their country due to national security risks and concerns, and we should also heavily discourage any other further cooperation in any diplomatic measure or even cultural sharing measures with the Republic of India, considering that they have completely abandoned any premise of being a Western aligned country and have practically moved entirely into being a full-on BRICS member once more. It's an incredibly disappointing thing to see. For a while, we actually had been encouraging the Indians to back off of their BRICS affiliation and start moving into a more Western aligned sort of a position, but it appears that due to earlier actions this year where the United States heavily insulted the Republic of India publicly, they've completely run away from the West and have literally run into the open embrace of the BRICS alliance once more, completely abandoning any ambition of being a Western aligned state, but at the same time also hoping that Western industries will continue to offshore in India, which is the only thing that's building their economy at this point. So with that in mind, a lot of people have been talking about what in the world we should do to the Republic of India for this action today, which is obviously not within our best interests. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So I'll be honest. I am sort of pissed off at this point about what's happening with India because this is something here that, of course, India should not be doing to ignore sanctions like this. This is a pretty grave thing that India is doing here because it is throwing a lifeline to Vladimir Putin once again because the whole point of the sanctions was to cut off the oil sales from Russia so they can't make any money. And if you recall, me and the Enforcer have had debates about whether or not China was going to bail Russia out, and it turns out that India might be the one to bail them out, which is kind of a little bit unexpected, and they've totally flipped the script on the West. So what should NATO do in response to this? Because right now they have to do something because India is blatantly violating sanctions at this point. So what should they do? 64% said NATO should sanction India heavily, while 25% said NATO should blockade the Russian ships going to India, and 7% said there's not much to be done. So I would say a start would be to sanction India heavily. That's a good start. There's already sanctions on Russian oil and things like that, but we need to actually hit India with some type of punishment because they need to be punished pretty harshly for this. They're blatantly basically giving a middle finger to the West right now. And I will say this, though. The U.S. kind of caused it to an extent because by taking a very hostile approach with India, who is a BRICS country, of course, they tend to lean toward Russia and China. Once again, they're sort of pissing them off to the point where they want to go toward the enemy. So that's not good either from the U.S. foreign policy perspective. But at the same time, though, they got to do something because Modi cannot be allowed to be helping out Russia, basically fund the war in Ukraine through these oil sales right here. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the Republic of India should have all diplomatic connections cut off from the United States and also the European Union, as well as the entirety of the NATO alliance. The fact that the Republic of India is now going to start openly becoming an unfriendly nation to the West in terms of its diplomatic actions is something that should be met with strong force, at least in the diplomatic sense. Sanctions should be levied against the Republic of India for its current actions and current support of the Russian Federation through its continued purchase of oils, and we should see that the Republic of India is now treated as a hostile power by the United States of America, or at least an unfriendly power at a minimum. I would also say that additionally we need to see about a possible venture, considering that we might be able to salvage our strategic position within the Indian Ocean and opening up diplomatic relations with the country of Sri Lanka. If we open up diplomatic relations with the country of Sri Lanka, while it is a much smaller country to work with, we still can use the nation of Sri Lanka as a strategic basing point for the United States Navy and other armed forces within the area to ensure that there is a permanent and significant power projection of the United States Armed Forces and our alliance's armed forces within the area of the Indian Ocean for an indefinite period of time, even if we cannot get the Indians on board. So that generally should be our move from this point forward. Considering that we already have some somewhat friendly relations with the Sri Lankans, it shouldn't be that far of a push to get them fully on board with being in our alliance, or at least allowing for our forces to be based within their country. But at the moment, that appears to be the situation that we're working with. I would have to say, folks, that it was not a good idea to take the incredibly fragile relationship that we had with the Indians and completely throw it away. And I'll explain to y'all why that happened, because a lot of people may not know why in the world this would have happened. Back when India and Pakistan were shooting it out, we stepped into the middle of this whole thing, which we shouldn't have, because we have relations with the Pakistanis and we have relations with the Indians that are somewhat positive, pretty much putting us in a position where we shouldn't have tried to negotiate anything, and we should have let them negotiate themselves out of it, or just keep slugging it out, because there was really no way for us to go in and deal with it without pissing off someone who is somewhat friendly to us. And what we did in the midst of that is the President of the United States put out a whole bunch of insulting statements about the Republic of India and their leader for the entire world to see on social media. Now, generally, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, that's stupid, that wouldn't matter. It actually does matter. It's actually kind of crazy, folks, how little it matters to a lot of people that the president can kind of just go on social media and shit on people globally and they hardly do anything. But the Republic of India actually did what the binary response would be, which is to be insulted and then immediately tell someone to piss off. So they told the United States to piss off, basically, although we claimed that we negotiated the end of the India-Pakistan conflict, which was more so negotiated by the Pakistanis and Indians Indians, with a little bit of help from Qatar, but more primarily on their own. The Indians took that as a great insult because their government is hyper-nationalist, so painting the Indian government or India in a negative light at all is viewed very negatively by the Republic of India, and so just based off their ideological dog-headedness or stubbornness alone on not being insulted because India is the greatest and latest place on the planet according to their government, they completely went and ran off from any Western relationships and are now going full on into being Russian and Chinese aligned. So that's basically the situation.
That is still no excuse for India to start basically funding the war against Ukraine, because some people argue, I saw it earlier on Twitter, some people were saying, well, India's not necessarily supporting the war in Ukraine because all they're doing is buying Russian oil. It's purely for economic reasons. But by de facto, they are funding the war in Ukraine because that's why there's sanctions on Russian oil, because without that, which is one of Russia's main ways to make money, they can't really keep the war in Ukraine going for years. So India, in my opinion, is 100% funding the war in Ukraine by doing this. So just because they got angry with the United States doesn't give them a pass to go start funding basically a war against innocent civilians. That's no excuse for that. If that's the way India's thinking, then they need to, get some help. That's not a good way to think. But also, we do have some leverage over India, though. If India wants to play games like this, because of course they are a BRICS country, if they want to play games like this, the U.S. could simply tell American companies that they need to leave India or start punishing American companies for having manufacturing inside of that country. That's one thing we could do, because there's a lot of major American companies that have manufacturing, like large technology companies inside of India. That would damage their economy quite badly. Also, another thing we could do is also threaten to cancel H-1B visas and things like that they're sending folks over to work here in the United States. We could cancel those as a form of punishment as well. So we still have a lot of leverage over them. So if India wants to tango, then it could get nasty if the U.S. was willing to take it there.
Also, considering the fact that our collective trade with the Republic of India is around $129 billion, this is something that we could deal with either with scalpel-like precision and generally have this done quite easily and quickly, considering that there isn't really a large flow of money involved here, at least compared to other trade wars that we've about to been getting into in the past. Or we could go into this with a sledgehammer, and while it will cause damage, it's not going to be as damning as the damage that has been caused in possible trade wars with China or other countries, like Canada or Mexico. So with that in mind, this is something that we generally could try and get a handle on and deal with here fairly quickly, is the situation that we currently have right now with the Republic of India. Now, another thing that I'll also have to say, and some people have been pointing this out in the chat, and this is actually true, India's hyper-nationalist deal that they've got going on now comes from a pretty deep-seated sort of an insecurity about how they look compared to Western powers, because for a little bit of a time, about a century, the entirety of what is India and Pakistan as well as Bangladesh was actually under control first by the British East India Company, and then secondly, after the British East India Company was dissolved and it was reformed into the British Raj, they were then under the control of the British Raj for about another 70 or 80 years. Since then, since they've gotten their independence, the Republic of India looks at itself when dealing with Western powers as being generally superior to them, and that the British were just holding them down, and that the British were wildly stupid and incompetent, which I do have to say this, folks, that is kind of hard for a country like India to say, because it's like, if the British were stupid and incompetent, how did they take over your country? It's like, that generally would lead us to believe that the British had to have been fairly competent, at least at the matter of statescraft and war at a minimum, to be able to do that. But nevertheless, that's led India to generally have a very fragile sort of a dealing with any country that is from Western Europe or Western European aligned, like the United States, because whenever any one of them seems to give the Indians a little bit of buck, the Indians just pack up and run off. Like, that's exactly what they do, because they take it as a significant insult, and they look at it more so as we're never going to be talked down to by anyone in Europe again. That's basically their approach. So that's why, at least in this scenario, as soon as the United States insulted them, they literally packed up shop and literally went at 180 in the complete opposite direction practically overnight.
Also, American companies need to start realizing something. They need to start realizing that you can't set up shop in BRICS countries. Like, you can't do that. Of course, the labor is going to be cheaper there because there's not many regulations on it. So obviously, there's no real minimum wage. I'm not even sure if India has a minimum wage. If they do, it's extremely low because they barely pay anybody anything in India. That's why a lot of companies go and get cheap labor there. So the company's got to realize that it may get you some short-term gains and profits to take your manufacturing to places like India and China that are clearly not Western aligned, and they would like to actually gang up on America if they could. You got to take your manufacturing somewhere else. Like, for example, in our sphere of influence, if it's like to South America, to Mexico, or somewhere like that, you got to take it over there, because the logic behind it is fleeting to me. Is why would you set up in a country that could literally flip like India's doing right now at any point in time, like on a moment's notice? Why would you set up shop there? And there's some large technology companies I won't name, but many people know who I'm talking about, that have recently started moving manufacturing from China to India, thinking that that was a better deal, and it was not. As we're finding out, it could go really nasty if the U.S. starts taking it there.
I would say, folks, that if any manufacturing is offshored, because it's always going to be offshore, there's no way to bring it back to the United States, then it should primarily go to Mexico. Mexico should be the #1 landing ground for anyone who's looking for cheap labor currently, because Mexico is not only directly on our border, meaning that we have a significant amount of power projection over them, which ensures that they will remain American aligned into the indefinite future, but it also meets their needs, at least on the economic side of things, of getting cheap labor to be globally competitive with their products. So it's a win-win for both the U.S. strategically and also for them economically. If anything from there, we could see that offshoring could happen in places like the Philippines or any other Western aligned countries along those lines, because it makes no sense for us to offshore major industries and financial ventures in countries like Communist China and the Republic of India, where they are openly un-American and actually work against their interests. That means that that relationship will sour, and there's going to be a large amount of financial loss when that does occur. So it's generally not a good thing. Also, it makes it a lot more difficult for us to be mobile on the global stage, at least when we're dealing with our rivals like China and India, especially with China, because we have such a large economic relationship with them, as they do with us, that if any actions are done to the detriment of China in our interest, it also causes a great amount of damage. Same thing with India, to a much smaller degree, but still same nonetheless. That should be something we should be trying to curb and curtail into the future, so that way we're a lot more diplomatically mobile and maneuverable in situations dealing with the Chinese or the Indians or any country that is not necessarily entirely in the Western sphere or un-American. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And also, folks, to bring y'all a little bit of news out of the Middle East and North Africa, we did hear today that the central government's forces in Sudan have actually struck and destroyed a major RSF convoy near to the area of the border with Chad in the Darfur province. This is about, I believe, something like 200 miles from the city of Al-Fashir, which currently still has the massacre that's ongoing within it. But it does appear that the Sudanese Air Force was able to target and destroy a significant convoy of the RSF, which appears to have possibly been transporting a large amount of fuel or some forms of oil to be able to transport and continue to equip their forces with proper logistics and equipment systems. So it does appear like it was an incredibly significant hit. And we can also see the clip here of the major fires and explosions as well. This is directly along the border, from what we understand, with Chad. And this also shows us that there is some sort of a significant trade relationship going on with the RSF and some sort of an entity or the government of Chad directly across the border. Also, the strike occurred around the area of the city of Adri. What you're seeing right here is actually this town and this area. And the convoy was hit literally on the A5, right on the other side of the border. So it does appear that there is some sort of an ongoing trade relationship that the RSF has with some sort of an entity or the government of Chad within inside of the nation of Chad, or the Republic of Chad as it's technically called. We also have been able to hear that inside of the state of Israel, or more so within the West Bank, a vehicle rammed an IDF checkpoint today. It was obviously lit up. And everyone inside the vehicle was killed. And from what we understand, the IDF has stated that 2 terrorists accelerated their vehicle toward IDF soldiers during an operational activity at a security checkpoint in Hebron. The IDF forces did fire upon the vehicle and killed the occupants inside. This is a fairly rare instance, mind you all, that's happened in the West Bank. We don't really hear of crazy stuff happening like this often. Usually there are riots and there's a large amount of stones thrown at the Israelis, which usually lead them to retreat to their armored cars and leave the area. But we've rarely ever seen anyone try and charge a border checkpoint, or a checkpoint at all, inside the West Bank recently that led to IDF forces firing on them. So a fairly odd instance, to say the least. Also, we've been able to hear that the U.S. is supplying Israel with a new amount of large bombs. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So the famed bunker busters that were used a short while back during the situation between Israel and Iran, apparently a large number of those were suddenly transferred to Israel over the last couple of days. And nobody's really sure why, but apparently, according to reports, it's a quote unquote significant number of bunker busters, which are, of course, very expensive munitions. So what are your thoughts about that? And 68%, actually 70%, said Israel is prepping for war with Iran, while 19% said the U.S. is about to do round two of strikes on Iran's nuclear industries, and 5% said this is a routine transfer. So my initial thought when I saw this is it sounds like the United States is preparing Israel for another round of attacks with Iran. It sounds like that's what's coming up, but once again, we don't know when that's going to be, and Iran is experiencing some really, really bad domestic crises right now, like, for example, the water crisis, also some isolated uprisings here and there around Iran. Right now, they're kind of in some hot water, also some air quality issues as well. I think Iran's got pretty much everything going on. They got like the 12 crises, 12 plagues or something going on right now at this point. It's pretty rough right now inside of Iran. So I would say Israel is prepping for war and the U.S. is sending these over. And I don't know the exact cost of bunker busters, but once again, we're finding that money. We're finding that money to send those bombs back to Israel. I tell you what, they're getting supplied yet again. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say there's a high possibility the Israelis are preparing for a war with Iran, but I do want to remind all of y'all that there has been at least about 8 that I can remember bunker buster transfers that have been conducted over the course of the year, usually to the tune of several $billions a pop per arms transfer or bomb transfer that has been conducted over the course of the year for the Israelis to conduct airstrikes on a myriad of targets, of course all of them Iranian aligned, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, also al-Nusra within Iraq, forces inside of Syria, such as ISIS, which is not directly affiliated with Iran, but still generally is within that radical Islamic group or grouping with Iran, and also the Iranians themselves. So I would say that there is a likelihood that this could be used directly against Iran, but these could also likely be used against any Iranian proxy force within the region, including al-Nusra, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, yada yada, so on and so forth. The list is endless. It's longer than Santa's. So I would generally say that it is going to be against an Iranian group, not necessarily sure if it's going to be against the Islamic Republic of Iran. I do want to say, though, that it is kind of a little funny. I have to bring this up, folks, because I have to make sure that people kind of keep this in mind. It is a little bit funny, folks, that we can endlessly send bombs provided by the U.S. taxpayer, by the way, I just want to clarify that, to Israel to the tune of billions. But whenever it comes to supporting the war in Ukraine and helping the Ukrainians to fight the Russians that clearly are as un-American or anti-American as the Iranians are, then we have a hard time finding the cash, or we can't really send them the bombs, or, you know, the bombs are out on holiday, or we're on lunch, or they've gone fishing, or the batteries are not included, and everything else in between. I just gotta say every time we bring this up, don't y'all find that a little bit odd that the Israelis can get bombs provided by the U.S. taxpayer, but then when it comes to Ukraine, other people have to buy the weapons for Ukraine because we won't even give them a cent in terms of weaponry? Isn't that a little odd? I find that to be quite odd. Like,
Yeah. Do you think that do you think the United States is going to start switching up their foreign policy? Because in the national security like strategy for 2026 that came out that we were going over last night, that strategy seems to indicate the U.S. is going to be backing off of pretty much all foreign initiatives outside of South America and also the whole hemisphere where we're at. It seems like they're backing off of all of it. So what did it say about Israel? Did it say anything specific, like a bullet point list of what they're planning to do there? Because I don't recall seeing that.
Let's see here. I didn't get to read this one last time, folks, so now it's going to be the time. We're going to pass Asia. We're going to get to the middle of the East. Let's see here. It should be here somewhere. Let's see. Well, where the hell is it? Did I just bypass it?
Should be a table of contents up top.
Well, it's kind of like a subsection within a major section. I don't think it's in the table of contents. Asia.
The Middle East should have its whole section.
Hold up. Let's see here. Well, I'd be damned. Did I pass it? Or was it the first one? The Western Hemisphere. Well, I'd be damned. Hold up. I mean, maybe it's under Europe. I think it may be under Europe. Hold up. Let's see. Promoting European greatness. Oh, boy. Here we go. It's under the Europe. It's the middle. For some reason, I thought it was between Asia and Europe. But, okay, so, let's see. Oh, here we are. For half a century at least, American foreign policies prioritized the Middle East above all other regions. The reasons are obvious. But anyways, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Oh, wait a minute, they don't have a bullet point for the Middle East. Oh, if they don't have a bullet point, I'm sure there's going to be something sweet in here. So, we're going to have to give this one actually a little read over, folks, to see what the national strategy is going to be in the Middle East. Let's see. So today, at least two of those dynamics no longer hold. Energy supplies have diversified greatly, with the United States once again being a net energy exporter. We've always been a net energy exporter, by the way. That's not new. Superpower competition has given way to great power jockeying, in which the United States retains the most enviable position, reinforced by our great leaders' successful revitalization of our alliances in the Gulf with other Arab partners and with Israel. Have to make special note of Israel. But conflict remains the Middle East's most troublesome dynamic, but there is today less to this problem than headlines might lead one to believe. Iran, the region's chief destabilizing force, has been greatly weakened by Israeli actions since October 7th of 2023, and of course our great leader's Operation Midnight Hammer, which significantly degraded Iran's nuclear program, which it didn't. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains thorny. But thanks to the ceasefire and release of hostages that our great leader has negotiated, process towards a more permanent peace has been made. Hamas chief backers. Well, can we get to the point where they actually explain
where's the strategy?
How great they are, what they are actually doing this next year? Let's see.
It seems like they don't really have a section for Israel. They're mentioning the Middle East, but they're not mentioning Israel specifically and how they're going to deal with them. They mention every other country in here about how they're dealing with them, sort of like very loosely, but they don't really mention Israel very much.
Let's see here. Middle East partners are demonstrating their a trend line American policy should continue to encourage, but doing so will require dropping America's misguided experiment with hectoring these nations, especially the Gulf monarchies, into abandoning their traditions and historic forms of government. So while we're while we're actively involved now, according to the national strategy, in basically starting psyops in European countries to curb their governments, we should never get involved in stopping or curbing any Middle Eastern dictatorship that's still beheading people for minor crimes. We shouldn't get involved in that at all. And also, while we absolutely love the Middle Eastern governments, and we're not going to touch them at all or do anything to them, when those Middle Eastern people pack up and move to Europe, they're now a crime against humanity. Like I gotta say, folks, when you put that two and two together, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But we should encourage and applaud reform when and where it emerges organically. Not in Europe, though. We're just going to sledgehammer Europe day and night. But in the Middle East, we're going to give them soft hands, soft little hands with silk gloves. And we're going to go, that's okay. If you behead another journalist from America, that's fine. We'll just overlook it. You can kill a million of them if you want. It's fine. We just need to make sure that we're all aligned together. The key to successful relations with the Middle East is accepting the region, its leaders, and its nations as they are while working together on areas of common interest. Okay.
The Middle East has never been like that, I'm afraid. I'm not, and not throughout history, it's never been like that.
Yeah.
But also, by the way, just based on the statements coming from U.S. officials, because this strategy here really doesn't lay anything out in specifics, even though it lays out specifics about Ukraine and things like that. They don't lay out specifics about Israel. But based on what the officials have been saying, verbally at least, they're basically saying that they want to back away from being heavily involved in Israel's affairs. That's at least what they're saying publicly. I personally don't believe they're going to follow through with that. I think they're just saying it for political purposes because the United States has never really abandoned Israel pretty much ever, I would say. So I don't think they're going to start doing that now. I don't think that would serve anybody really well. Like, not in my personal opinion. I don't think it would serve them well politically to abandon Israel. So I doubt they're going to abandon them.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to abandon them. I just read the rest of this quietly while you were talking. They're obviously not going to abandon them. Also, I like this, folks. In the Middle East, we will give dictatorships, and when I say dictatorships, I mean absolute monarchies where there isn't even a parliament. It's just the sovereign is the sole power of the nation. We're just going to completely back off of them. But when it comes to Andrei Yermak having allegations of corruption thrown against him, that's enough to bring down the whole system in Ukraine, like literally rip it asunder. But when a Middle Eastern country kills an American journalist in an office, then we'll just completely overlook that one and just let that slide. And also a million other things that they do that are quite questionable. We're moral champions in one continent, and then in the other, we just completely forget that there are a lot of questionable things going on, far more questionable than elsewhere. But anyways, it does appear that through the rest of this, it pretty much says that the Middle East is no longer our issue because the great and powerful has solved all issues in the region. There's truly no enemies there. It's a land of peace. It's a veritable utopia. And so we're just going to invest and build our allies in the area and completely forget that Iran is still developing and working on nuclear weapons like they have been for the past 10 years. So I hope that addresses that well for everyone, so that way we all know where we're heading in the Middle East, because it appears that it's kind of generally undefined, at least compared to Asia and Europe like it was in the other chapters. But anyways, folks, before we move on into the rest of our news, I do want to make sure that we get a couple of questions before we get to the hunt for Captain Craig Sparrow, and also all of the news coming out of the front lines in the war in Ukraine. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first 3 Super Chat questions, the channel tradition. Right in the middle of the news, we jump into 3 of them, and then we move on with the rest of our news and grab the rest of them during our last question segment. But our first one during our middle time question segment goes to Bobby, also known as LC39A, a regular channel donor, and thank you very much, Bobby, for throwing in that very generous $100 support yet again tonight and helping to bankroll the Enforcer channel to stay on the air day in and day out all the time. Prime time 99 all the time. But anyways, Bobby said, love your opening themes.
Hey, and thank you so much for the unbelievably massive support, Bobby, or LC39A as it used to be called, and a humongous thanks to you for enjoying those opening themes. I put a great amount of time and money into trying to get those opening themes to sound as best as they possibly could, and I gotta say that I'm always happy to hear that people are really enjoying the intro, and love to hear it as they pass by the countdown to the beginning of the show, and I gotta thank you massively, LC39A, for being one of those folks that is supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running, so that way we can try and eventually cover or recoup the costs of creating those incredibly expensive opening themes. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you that went out of their way to support this channel, we wouldn't have been able to make this thing possible, not only for the for today and tomorrow, but for the past several years, to make all of this come around. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to @symbol, who just simply has an @ in their name. But let me see if I can see, because YouTube changed the usernames around. Let me make sure I can maybe get a real name. Also, I love the corgi in the profile picture, by the way. They have a nice corgi right there. And we do love corgis. It's Hockey. It is Hockey that threw that in. But their username is simply an @symbol. But thank you very much, Hockey, for that $40 support right there. Very generous. And they said, keep up the great reporting.
And thank you so much for wanting us to keep up the great report. And I got to thank you massively for the support. I love the corgi profile picture, by the way. Great, one of the best profile pictures. And I got to say, we will keep up the great report, and we try our best every night, and we hope that we've been able to once again meet the bar already tonight for the kind of reporting in detail that we usually have on practically all of our shows. So humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, we're on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the night.
And this one goes to Just a Plumber 3, who puts in a $20 support, and thank you very much, Just a Plumber, for that support. And he said, I just heard the opening music in the bathroom with my brother in the shower over there. LOL, it's Enforcer time, and a big LSA from us brothers to you brothers.
Hey, and a huge thanks to you for the support. And also, really cool to hear that you heard the opening music and got in there to watch the show. I got to thank you humongously for the support, Just a Plumber, and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it rolling day after day, week after week, month after month, and year after year. It's thanks to the folks at the LSA who go over their way to support this channel through the Super Chats and also their support on Patreon that we're able to make this thing a reality quite literally every single day of the week, every year. And I got to thank you massively, Just a Plumber, for being one of those folks, along with everyone else who supported tonight, and everyone who's been supporting for years, because each and every one of y'all have been making this show a reality. While we do all of the work on air and all of the talking and the analysis, the news coverage, none of that would have been possible without the support that y'all gave. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night, which we have quite a lot. And of course, folks, it's time to get right into it right now. It's time for us to move on to the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow and his band of 40 thieves. You best start believing in bullshit, son. You're living in it. But beyond that, moving us on into a periphery piece of the news, a 7.1 earthquake broke out today in Alaska, or really along the Alaskan-Canadian border. So this is going to cause supply line issues in Alaska as a result of this. Not incredibly large ones, but they're going to be a bit of an issue for a little while. Moving on from that, and on down towards the area of the Caribbean, it appears that the Cubans, who apparently get their news via carrier pigeon, have finally reached out to the U.S. government to ask them what's going on. That's according to Reuters, at least. They reached out to the United States to say what the area is going to look like after they get rid of Maduro. And the U.S. wouldn't tell them, obviously, because they're Cubans and they're communist. So with that in mind, we also were able to hear the USS Gerald R Ford has left the area of the U.S. Virgin Islands today. You can see it just kind of sailing away out there in the distance. It's kind of like that one song, you know, from like the early 2010s where I was like, sail, boom, you know the one I'm talking about. I probably didn't do it too well, but you know the one.
I don't know. I'll have to take your word for it, though. That was a hell of an impression of a song, though, right there. I tell you what, that's like some of that electronic music that the kids like to make.
Man, honestly, man. Imagine all the people. Oh, sorry, let me do it right. Imagine all the people. Pun. Peace.
Peace. No more war. No more war. Peace. No more war. No more war. War so bad. More peace.
Water bad, the piece of good. Water bad, piece of good. But also, we got news from a little lawmaker. Oh my goodness, that is one hell of a gift right there. But we got some news from a lawmaker that apparently the boat involved in the quadruple tap was not heading towards the United States when it was hit. So now extra controversy has been added to the congressional inquiry at the moment about that strike. Additionally, in the Eastern Pacific, which I want to keep in mind to all of y'all, isn't currently charged in the public zeitgeist of the whole obliterating and killing the narco-terrorist deal. We were able to see that the Coast Guard actually just seized one of these vessels today in the Eastern Pacific. You know, they didn't hit it with a hellfire or anything like that. They just stopped it, arrested the crew, detained them, and then impounded the vessel and found contraband on board. So here's the clip. When you see the Coast Guard here, hovering over the boat and firing at it with an M82 to disable the engines, so they can't try and make a break for it.
That's crazy. A sniper with a huge
cal.
like 50 cal on a rope. Like, surely you can't get a good aim with that thing bouncing around the rope.
Oh, and he was actually smacking that engine.
He's a damn good sniper, I tell you what.
Man, these are those snipers that go through all that real training.
This guy's got that big scope, too.
Bro, this guy whipped out the double quadruple magnum sniper to try and land these shots. And here comes one of the Coast Guard patrol boats that's now speeding.
Also, by the way, the Coast Guard, the Coast Guard as a branch is just absolutely badass. Like, the Coast Guard gets underestimated for what they do. Those people in the Coast Guard, they've got like no fear response at all. Like, they jump into the water with no fear. They're swimming with the sharks with no fear. It's like those people like literally have no fear of pretty much anything with what they're doing.
And we can now see them running up alongside. I gotta say, the Coast Guard is honestly one of the most badass branches in the U.S. Armed Forces. Technically, it's not a part of the Department of Defense. I think it's a Department of Homeland Security department now, but still, a really cool group. We now see them boarding immediately with the crew at the bow of the vessel with their hands raised over their heads. And we can also see the large amount of contraband, which is clearly visible here, and was seized by the Coast Guard at the stern of the vessel. Now, I just gotta say, folks, as far as building up a case against the Venezuelans, this is how it should be done, because this builds up a perfect case. One, we are seizing the contraband outright. Two, we aren't spending gazillions of dollars keeping the military down there endlessly and also tying up strategic assets in a non-strategic region. And three, this also allows for us to eventually, although this would be unfortunate, eventually, at least for the diplomatic setting, eventually have the cartel possibly fire upon the Coast Guard, which then would give us the justification to start bombing the narco boats, because it'd be too dangerous to send the Coast Guard out to detain them, and we could also start to take more significant military actions against Venezuela with proper justification. So I would generally say this is the way we should have been approaching this from day one, and then work up from there to some sort of a higher escalatory action once it was appropriate or necessary. And I'm trying to understand what the naive comment was. Like, I'm actually trying to, like, think, man. I'm like, what in the hell would that even be? Anyways, that's the end of that clip right there. Very nice to see the Coast Guard doing its work out there in the Eastern Caribbean. But at the moment, a lot of people are talking about what in the world's going to be happening with Venezuela. Are strikes going to be happening, or are they not? Or are they? Or might they? Or maybe? Or will they, or will they not? Or will they won't? Or won't they will? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that?
So the Gerald R Ford aircraft carrier appears to have suddenly left the coast near Venezuela today, and nobody's really sure why it's left. So I believe the Ford is the one that hauled ass all the way across the world, basically, to get over here to Venezuela. Isn't that the one that did that?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so it hauled ass all the way around the world to get over here, and now all of a sudden it suddenly left without doing anything. So nobody's really sure what's going on, but you could see in a picture it was just sailing off into the sunset, I guess just headed out for the day. But what's happening with that? 46% said strikes are not going to happen, while 27% said it's just moving position, probably somewhere else on the coast, and 17% said it's a feint to confuse Maduro. So I'll be honest with y'all, it's hard to predict. I've been saying this like a broken record. It's hard to predict what's going on in Venezuela because the strategy is not very clear, and it's hard to even speculate about the strategy because it's kind of a no-win scenario. So maybe the Fords are leaving because they've struck a secret deal with Maduro, possibly. But at the same time, though, it is very possible. We have seen this before with the U.S. administration. It's possible they're moving it away from the coast as a feint, basically a trick to make Maduro think that he can let his guard down, and then they're going to conduct strikes right after he thinks it's safe. That's also possible as well. So I'm actually with the unsure and undecided. I'm having to take the cop-out answer with the 11%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that strikes are most likely not going to happen. I would have to be with the 46%. I don't even know when in the world they'll happen at this point, but I'm starting to become fairly certain they're never going to happen. And if they do, they're going to be so small that if you're not paying attention, you're going to miss it. That's what I would generally assume at this point. If we're going off of what happened with Midnight Hammer, not a lot's going to be coming out of this one either. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that, at least the best I can, in my opinion. And we're now going to be moving out of the hunt for Captain Crack Sparrow and on over to Europe, as Sweden has reported that submarine sightings within the Baltic of Russian subs is becoming incredibly routine, which is fairly concerning to the Swedes, as well as incredibly concerning to everyone in the surrounding region, as that would greatly help and increase Russia's abilities to besiege the Baltics if a major war with Europe started. Meanwhile, in France, we were able to hear that Emmanuel Macron made a statement today that was incredibly interesting. And this is the statement. Russia is locking itself into an escalatory approach and is not seeking peace. I condemn in the strongest possible terms the massive strikes that targeted Ukraine this night, particularly its energy and railway infrastructure. We must continue to put pressure on Russia to compel it towards peace. I will travel to London on Monday to meet with the Ukrainian president, the British Prime Minister, and the German Chancellor, and to take stock together of the situation and the ongoing negotiations within the framework of the American mediation. Ukraine can count on our unwavering support. This is the very purpose of the efforts we have undertaken within the framework of the Volunteers Coalition. We will pursue them with the Americans to provide Ukraine with security guarantees without which there will be no robust and lasting peace. For what is at stake in Ukraine is also the security of Europe as a whole. So it does appear that there will be a significant meeting that's going to be held between the three key European powers, Britain, France, and Germany, as well as President Zelensky, about the current strategic situation in Europe and where to move forward from here. That is most likely going to be talk about what in the world's going on with Ukraine, how their arms getting bent behind their back by the United States to accept unconditional demands, and also most likely including the National Defense Strategy, which was just published, that made it kind of clear that the U.S. was more so going to be going to war with Europe than it was going to be going to war with anyone else by actively getting involved in practically every single country in the region's internal affairs, and also continuing to push for other crazy stuff, like, for example, the complete dissolution of the European Union. That seems to probably be what they're going to be talking about, is what kind of strategic and economic position the European Union is going to be in the future, considering that NATO will most likely start to see a decent amount of strain here within the next few years and may become a fairly weakened alliance due to the dissension that's now existing between the two sides, the European side and then the U.S. But anyways, Moving on from that news in France, we are going to be moving on into Ukraine, or more so, kind of getting closer to Ukraine. We have to cover a little important news to happen off the coast of Bulgaria today, as the Kairos, one of the vessels that was actually hit by the Ukrainian drones several days ago, actually ended up running upon shore, or running aground today in Bulgaria. This video clip actually showed the tanker running aground on the coast of Bulgaria. At first, the vessel failed to respond to calls, after which authorities learned that 10 people are on board, who later requested evacuation. A rescue attempt was halted due to bad sea state and weather conditions, but the crew managed to drop anchor 1 nautical mile from Topol, which is on the coastline of Bulgaria. And let me see if I can find this for y'all here. The town, right here. 1 mile off of, those are some rocky cliffs. If that thing had run aground, folks, on a topple, I think that thing would have actually been broken up on the rocks pretty quickly, as a matter of fact. That is a very rocky coastline the whole way up and down. So they were fairly lucky they were able to cast anchor right there, because they literally were about to go into what's the equivalent of the ship's teeth and just be chewed up and spat out by the ocean if they had ran up on those rocks. But you can see in this clip, the Cairo still has a lot of battle wounds on it. Practically the entirety of the hull has been burnt from the stem to stern, and the superstructure does show significant burn damage as well. The ship is probably most likely adrift at this moment, which is why they were not responding to calls. They most likely were without power, and their backup emergency communications didn't really work either. So it does appear to be a fairly wild sort of an occurrence, to say the least. Moving on from that, though, and on up into the area of the nation of Moldova, the nation of Moldova has declared an emergency and is requesting assistance from Romania following the attack on Ukraine, which has started to greatly affect Moldova's energy grid, which is heavily interconnected with that of Ukraine's. So they are currently having to deal with that situation at the moment as well. Now, it's finally time for us, folks, to move on into Ukraine. And unfortunately, we have to start off with bad news. According to the IAEA Chief Inspector Grossi, he has stated that the Chernobyl sarcophagus fails to withstand the impact damage from the prior attack that was caused by a Russian drone, and it does appear that there is a major security threat to the containment of the reactor from the new safe containment. The sarcophagus covering the damaged fourth reactor at Chernobyl can no longer perform its safety functions following a drone attack. The protective dome has lost its primary safety functions, including the ability to contain hazardous materials, according to Rafael Grossi, who is the chief inspector of the IAEA. However, he clarified that there is no irreversible damage to the supporting structure or monitoring systems. Repair work has already been partially completed, but it must continue to ensure long-term nuclear safety. The sarcophagus, which was commissioned in 2019, was designed to prevent the spread of radioactive dust and aerosols for 100 years. The project cost the international community about $2.2 billion. In February of 2025, the president of Ukraine reported that a Russian drone had struck the protective dome, causing significant damage. Despite this, the radiation levels around the station were reported normal. So it does appear that at the moment, the Russian Federation is apparently causing a decent amount of damage to the Chernobyl new safe containment structure, and according to the IAEA, it is actually leaking some form of trace radiation at a minimum out of the containment vessel. It may even be a larger amount, we're not entirely sure. A lot of people have actually been talking about whether or not the Russians intentionally meant to hit this and cause this sort of a issue or a crisis inside of Ukraine in the midst of an ongoing war. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So nuclear safety is certainly not a specialty of the Russians. The Russians have a very bad history with respecting the dangers of nuclear power. And in fact, nuclear of any sort, they have a very hard time understanding how dangerous it is. And they really honestly don't care. Like, for example, when the Russians were at Chernobyl and occupying the area of the site, they were not being careful when they were there either. And they're not even being careful in Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant either. They're just careless and reckless when it comes to nuclear power, completely reckless. And we're seeing that they also conducted the drone strikes months back that ended up damaging the Chernobyl containment very badly. And now it no longer fully blocks the radiation coming off of the damaged side of Chernobyl because the containment structure has been compromised. So it took a lot of money to build that, by the way. I can't remember exactly what it cost to build it, but it was funded by many, many nations to build that thing. And for Russia to hit it or even get close to hitting it, which they did, is completely, I would say it's basically an attack, a terror terror attack, essentially. But 76% said that was Russia's actual goal, while 12% said Russia accidentally hit Chernobyl, and 6% said the damage really isn't super critical. And I would say, I'm with the majority, I think it was Russia's goal. They did it on purpose, and they did it to basically send a strong message to the Ukrainians that they could do worse if they chose to do so. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be the 75% as well. This clearly was the Russian Federation's main goal and generally a form of nuclear terrorism in an attempt to start putting the international world in panic because they conducted an attack on the Chernobyl containment structure. And considering that Chernobyl is the most famous nuclear disaster in the world, it's clearly going to strike fear not only in the Ukrainians, but the greater Western world as to what Russia could do next. So this does appear to be the intended side effect. Speaking of more news to talk on, we also were able to hear on the east of Kyiv that an IRIS-T actually conducted a successful interception overnight thanks to the forces of the Ukrainian air defenses that are around the city of Kyiv. We're actually able to see the IRIS-T launching off its missiles. Look at that. And they got it.
Damn, look at that IRIS-T. It really went good. Who provides the IRIS-T, by the way? Is that French?
No, actually, it's Sweet Tea that provides it.
Who's that?
Well, obviously, Matthew, that's the Sweet Tea and Ease.
Oh, yeah?
From the
Who
land
does
of
it really
Sweet
come
Tea.
from?
It comes from the Germans.
Okay, the Germans. For a minute, I thought it was French. I was like, I can't remember if it was French or not, but it's German. It's German.
No, Matthew, that's not French. The French one is the Samp tea. The German one is the Iris tea. Let me see here. Let the Samp tea. Let me go get that one real quick. Here we are. This is the French one, the Samp tea, and this, one second, is. Let me see here. One second. Let me make. Yeah. This is German. I had to double check. And this is the Irish tea, which is German.
Aha, I see. Also, someone said, "LOL, who dat?" Honestly, I didn't even know what he was talking about for a minute. He was saying Sweet Tea and Ease. I was like, what the hell? I was like, is this like a new faction or something I'm not aware of or something? Is this like a new group out in the Middle East that's giving over like, some stuff to Ukraine? I'm like, who the hell is this? Sweet Tea and Ease. What are we going to have next? Like the Lipton faction or something? Louisiana tea or something? Like, what's next?
Well, Matthew, actually all of these weapon systems, they all have tea in the name because they actually come from Arizona, specifically Arizona tea, which is the main producer of all of these equipment systems.
Well, you gotta have it, gotta have it.
You gotta have it. And I mean, they do make a damn good tea for only 99 cents. Like, we're not sponsored by them or anything, but it's actually pretty decent for only 99 cents. But anyways, we also got to see a Ukrainian MiG-29 taking off and rapidly gaining altitude with afterburners fully engaged, which was pretty cool. There it goes. Like a shooting star.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Now that's hardcore. Look at them.
And also, Christian Cruz said the IRS-T is German, but the rockets are made by MBDA. Aren't those the people who do like the movie reviews, like IMDb or something like that? Like,
man, I'll tell you what, you're as full of those jokes. You're going to get an honorary. There you go. Look at that. He's a movie reviewer, or he's a missile reviewer, depending on the day.
But moving on out of that and into our location unknowns, we also got to see Magura equipped with AIM 9s.
Ooh. Now that's nice. That's exquisite right there. The way the Ukrainians come up with these new weapons, some might say that they're innovative, some might say that they're mad. Whatever the case is, that is cool. I will admit that is pretty cool right there. It looks like it is a normal Magura with just literally missiles attached to it.
It's pretty cool. It's actually used to engage and shoot down low-flying Russian aircraft along the area of the Black Sea coast, or generally the Black Sea in general, depending on where they're at. This thing has actually been used for about several years now. It's just that there's not really a lot of pictures taken of them, and the specific variant of the Magura is actually somewhat rare. But moving on from that and into our next bit of location unknown news, we also get to see a Russian in the well, a Russian in the well. Hi ho, the Russian in the well. The Russian goes down the well. Whoop, there he goes. And then the drone goes in after him. The Russian in the well.
Oh, damn, they went after him in the well. Damn, that's crazy. I don't think he was getting out of the well anyway. I'm not even sure if there's a way out of the well.
There was a way. You see, this guy was actually kind of a little smart when he did this, but he wasn't smart enough. You see, when he goes in there, he actually grabbed the rope right here. And you see him grab it, and he unspools it so he could use the rope to climb back out of the bottom. Problem is that he's now down there and he got obliterated. So all he's now doing is poisoning the water in the whale. That's actually a fairly medieval sort of
the water
attack.
in the whale.
The water in the whale. but actually, folks, that's a bit of a medieval tactic. When you're wanting to mess with people in the medieval times and you want to pull a little pranksy on them, after you get done sieging their town and you end up slaughtering a whole bunch of folks, you just take a couple of them and you throw them down the whale. And I don't know why I'm saying like that. Whale. Yeah, whale. You throw them down the whale. But you throw them down the well. And when they get thrown down there, you really can't get them out because they can't grab onto anything. They're dead. So they just kind of like rot down there and it poisons the water. So it becomes completely unusable. So that's a bit of a medieval thing. And considering that no one's living in this town, I don't think anyone's going to be needing the water out of this well anytime soon. Huh?
Also, by the way, like at the very beginning, why did it look like a Charlie Chaplin silent film in the beginning? Like when the drone came in and blasted like nearby, it's like he didn't even react to the drone blasting near him. Like, watch, like, look, he's smoking. Look, no reaction. This dude's like a Charlie Chaplin film, like the way he's just like taking these licks and he's ticking.
Man, honestly, man, this guy might be Buster Keaton, but he got busted up Keaton. Like, honestly, at the end of this all.
Rosette, all the way down the well.
Man, like, Zoink Scoop. They're slamming us. Raggy. But anyways, moving on from that clip and on down the line. Also, before we get down the line, we do have to get the Russian casualty report, which was graciously provided to the channel by none other than Miss Disa, an old guard, a channel legend, and a special title, Keeper of the Records. Miss Disa has stated that over the course of the day, one Bobcat skid steer was lost. Yeah, look at that. That's wonderful. That's incredible. What do you think, Matthew? What do you think?
I think that's a good thing that they got one Bobcat. I think that's something that is swell. It's something that should be really talked about. They're not talking about it enough in the media about these Bobcats getting taken out. I must say it's a whole of Ukraine approach, the way they're slamming these Bobcats. They're slamming them disgracefully. They're disgracing the Russians with every single one of these Bobcat hits. And I think a lot more attention should be brought to these Bobcats getting smashed because they're not talking about it enough, and it's a disgrace.
And that's why, folks, we're going to start the People Fund, the fund for people who want to know about Bobcats. But according to Miss Disa, Keeper of the Records, these are the indicative estimates of Russia's combat losses as of today, the 6th of December of 2025, according to the Armed Forces of Ukraine. 487 drones shot down is the 12th highest daily loss, an increase in vehicle losses, and another special equipment for Enforcer Matt. And we were able to see that 1,180 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the course of the past 24 hours, actually, along with 2 tanks, 2 armored vehicles, APCs is what they call them, 31 artillery pieces, 2 MLRSs, 487 drones, 130 supply trucks, and 1 Bobcat. It was a good day. A very good day, indeed. Now, moving us on into the front, we were able to see up in Kupiansk the Russians getting hit by the fiber optics. There goes their dirt bike, and there goes their outpost. With a vehicle inside. Oh my goodness! Look, they're going after a D-30.
That could be a dozer, or it could be a big artillery.
It could be anything. And they're also getting this drone, this Russian drone. And they're getting these Russians. And they're getting that drone. And then more Russians. Bleep. And this blob. And this medevac vehicle. Wow, what amazing work. What incredible work. Well, moving on from that part of the front, and further on down towards Konstantinivka, the Ukrainians also shot down a Russian FPV drone down here. You can hear it, can't you?
It sounds like a bug.
Oh, there it is. Oh, they added the sound effect. There it is.
They deafened me for that.
Oh my god! What a
hit
sniper! He got it in one shot!
With a red dot that far out moving, that's incredible.
Oh my god!
That is crazy. That is almost hard to believe.
Someone call an admin. This man is hacked. He's got an aimbot on, clearly. There is no way in hell. He landed that shot dead on. I mean, look at that. That's amazing.
How's that even possible? Like, I don't even understand how it's possible. Like, with a red dot, that is crazy. It's moving around, too. It's a moving target.
That is a moving target at 200 yards, several hundred feet up, at least at 200 yards, maybe even farther, maybe even 300 yards, several hundred feet up in the air, moving, mind you, and this man got it in one shot. I mean, that is unbelievable. This man needs to be put on the Ukrainian Olympics team for the target competitions, like the shotgun clay target competitions. This man's winning gold, guaranteed. This man's incredible here. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on from that little clip right there. And also, before I see some people saying, frag rounds, exploding ammo? No, he just fired a conventional round at that thing, which, let's see. It would be like an M855 maybe, or some other variant of that. He fired a standard round at it and hit it dead on. There was no mention by anyone anywhere of the guy using some non-conventional ammo like an exploding bullet. Also, by the way, exploding bullets are a war crime, so if he had those, Ukraine would also be in the midst of conducting a war crime if he had those on his possession. So with that, we are moving on into Novopoltavka, where we also got to see some Russians moving into the front in what can only be described as purgatorial conditions. Ah, T-60, a classic of the Soviet times. And they're
Also a clunker, too. Like, they really added some hideous modifications to it.
And off it goes. Followed along by another T-62. So it's a column of T-62s that they have around here right now. We also saw near to Nikan or Rivka, I believe. That's or Zatishok. That's a cooler one sounding, honestly. That the Ukrainians were holding that ground. Hold that ground, baby, in the 425th Skala Assault Regiment.
There's a clapped out boosted Civic out of my window right now, brapping.
Yeah, let's give it up for clapped out boosted Civics.
Actually, that's a Subaru. Never mind. It sounds like a Boxer.
Oh my god, man, is that Robert De Niro?
Nah, I'm afraid not.
I mean, it kind of looks like him.
A little bit. I mean, what did I tell you? Did I tell you not to go do that? I told you not to go do that.
Oh, look at that. The Russians are piling up sheet metal. And we also see the dog having a meal. On the backpack, of course. You see them talking about it, like, yes, it's a very crazy thing. You know, crazy shit happens out there. Wait, was that guy doing the fin pose? Yeah, he's making fun of him. But anyways, you see him looking out the window here. Oh, man.
Wow, looks like somebody tried to break into this joint.
Oh, wait a minute.
He's got ammo left. You see flexing his ammo. He said, look, I got green tips.
It's M855. I believe that's M855A1 green tips right there, folks, which is just what I said a second ago the other guy was using to shoot down that drone. So that appears to be a fairly common ammo. You can buy this stuff, folks, like everywhere, basically. Usually what most people use for target practice here in America, because it's very cheap, and it's also lead pointed, so it's approved for most indoor ranges, would be M193 rounds. But these actually have steel penetrators in them, meaning that they actually have a steel core. So they can actually punch through a little bit more. And it appears that that's the Ukrainian ammo of choice, is the M855 or the M855A1.
I love green tips. You can flex the green tips. Is it technically called armor piercing, or is it just like, is it not?
It's not really armor piercing. Like, it's like, it will punch, it'll cause damage to a backstop. That's why they don't allow it in indoor ranges. But it technically really isn't like armor piercing. There's actually another round that actually has a tungsten core inside of it, and that one's the one that's armor piercing, technically.
Interesting. Yeah, I always want to call it armor piercing, but I was like, is it really armor piercing? I don't think. Maybe it is, but you can at least pretend like it is.
Like, it will get through everything but a level 3+ plate, technically. So, I mean, you know, like, but then again, you know, if you say that, it's like a 44 Magnum can make it through a level 2 plate, I believe. So, you know, it's like, or a level 2 vest. It's not really a plate at that point. It's more so a vest. So it's like, you know, technically everything is armor piercing to a degree. But let me see here. What are the, let's see, 5.56 black tips. What are they called? Let's see. Oh, I can't find the name of them because it's an M something something. It's an M955. Yeah, that's what it is. But they're these right here, and these are the truly armor-piercing 5.56 rounds.
Yeah, the black tip bullets, there's like armor piercing variants, like some of these that you're looking at, and then there's some as well that's like civilian like versions that are polymer tipped, which are usually used in self-defense or hunting. So there's like a couple different versions of black tip.
But the ones you'll commonly find, folks, here in target shooting in the United States will be the M193 right here and the M855 right beside that. The M955s, I believe, are banned for sale to the public. The M200s are just blanks, and I don't really know the specific variants of the M196, the M197, the L110, or the SS109 because I myself have personally never used any of those to know exactly what they are. But anyways, moving on from that, let's get back to the clip. This guy's like, it's real stuff out there.
He said, I showed them the green tip ammo, and he said, I can't believe you have that. I said, I do have that. Look, a whole mag full.
Man, I heard a Russian in a trench say, man, the economy is doing so bad, I can't find any green. I said, here, let me give you 30. Oh, man. But anyways, that's generally the end of the clip. The rest of it's an interview, and unfortunately, we don't have subtitles for that interview. Moving on from that, though, and on down towards the area of Ukradivka, we also got to hear the Russians complaining about being in another death squad. So let's take a read on this one. So they're gathering us. Here we are indoors. They're gathering here. Some are with canes. It's pretty dark. Move aside a bit. I asked the guys outside. Here the guys are, standing with crutches, with canes. Man, it looks like Tiny Tim. Me included, you can barely see anyone's faces. We're going to fight the enemy. Yeah, with Category D, they're sending everyone. No legs, no
Category
arms.
D.
On crutches. That means like bottom grade. Like Category A would be like best grade assault troops. Category D is like literal bottom of the barrel sort of grade troops.
We're talking about like second or third string.
Yeah, like, you know, this is like no arms, no legs, basically, you know, like that sort of a deal. Blind, disabled people. Here. This is extermination, someone soldier says. Yeah, they basically set up a genocide for us. Here, we're getting our gear before the trip. They're sending us off, that's it. Here. Hit the pause. Bro, so they hit that pause.
He sounds like a dance move or something, like hit the pause, hit the gritty.
Man, bro, he said hit that gritty. But there you go, folks. That's the Russian army for you. That's what they're at now. The Russians are clearly winning, folks. Otherwise, they wouldn't need all that available manpower. They're just sending them out there for a victory lap, clearly. I'm sure that if we went to some amazing Twitter out there, like McGregor's, he'd be saying that they're winning today. But that clearly shows the opposite. But moving on from that, we also were able to see in the area of Pokrovsk, the Ukrainians of the 7th Corps once again raising their flag over the city to once again defeat another Russian lie that the Russians had completely taken Pokrovsk and encircled Mirnorab. They haven't. The 7th Corps is still in the middle of Pokrovsk. As you can see right there, the Russians have not taken the city yet. We have to deal with this, people. People coming in every night and saying, but I thought the Russians took Pokrovsk. It's like, who in the world does this full time? Me or you? It's like, who does this full time and checks on this stuff? It's us. Like, when the city falls, we'll let y'all know. It's going to eventually fall. I can promise y'all that. But not now, not yet at least. And so the Ukrainians, they still doggedly and heroically hold out and fight as long as they can, and the city still has not fallen yet. Moving on down into the southern front near Zaporizhia, we also got to see the Russian air defense getting hit by the Ukrainian Defense Intelligence of Ukraine. This is in the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhia Oblast of Ukraine.
Primary.
And we're about to make the Russians cry, Mary.
They said, we're going to send the Russians on a Hail Mary down the way.
Oh, it looks like we got to rebuke that thing to hell, bliat, suka, Вот так-то, пиздec иди нахуй, блядь. Moving on down into the city of Kherson, we also were able to see that the Russians, they hit a HIMARS decoy. The
I hadn't heard
Russians...
that HIMARS song in a long time. That was a classic too, the HIMARS song.
La 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 HIMARS.
Man, you're pretty good at that.
Man, I'm great at it. Where's the leak, ma'am?
Damn. What the hell?
Man, that's Patrick
You good?
Star. Man, that's Patrick
Oh.
Star right there, man. Bro, you
I
good?
thought
You
you
already
lost
know
your
what the
mind for a
reference is.
minute. I thought you lost your mind for a minute. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Talking about where's the leak, man?
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Now, I know that reference. I know that one.
No, Patrick. Mayonnaise is not an instrument. Oh, they actually damaged it a little bit, but oh, look, the Russians are going to blow up the decoy twice. Appears that they didn't learn the first time. Good to know they're still wasting munitions. We also got to see that some Neptunes were fired at Crimea overnight, like the Neptunes from, like, you know, Poseidon and all. They're being fired right now over at Ukraine, and making sure to give them a little bit of a shiner tonight. So we'll wait to see what's coming out of that. But before I get y'all on into a little bit of unfortunate news that came out of Kremenchuk today, I do want to make sure to address this little poll that we have, because I didn't include these on our map because I knew that we were already going to be running overtime tonight, just trying to get to all the big stuff. But a lot of surveys came out today from an independent polling group inside the United States that has been highly accurate in the past. And they came out with polling results that showed that the overwhelming majority of the U.S. public, pretty much 66% of the population or more in most categories, generally supported continuing to supply Ukraine with arms and equipment, and also believed that any attempt at peace negotiation or deal with the Russian Federation right now would leave us with a raw deal and not in the conflict. That pretty much was what most of the results were, and considering that the results were around, I believe it was in the mid 60s or getting towards the higher 60s, it practically was what we would call a congressional majority, which is a overwhelming majority of 2/3 of the public. And a lot of people are actually a little bit shocked to hear that, it seems. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
All right. So the polls today, they asked many different questions, but the main question I found most important and a very important a verdict on the poll is that 64%, actually a little over 64% of Americans overall support sending military aid to Ukraine, which is record numbers, by the way. That's higher than it was even back in 2022 when the war first started and Americans were up in an outrage about it. The numbers are higher right now than it was at the beginning of the war. So that's surprising. I'm actually with the 15% that says surprising to hear. About 73% of the audience said they weren't surprised to hear that, but I'm personally surprised to hear it because if you listen to the current leadership, it sounds like pretty much nobody supports Ukraine, but the numbers are showing that it's very, very popular in the United States to make sure that we're sending military aid to Ukraine. So that adds another variable to the idea of basically leaving Ukraine out to dry, because if politically speaking, most Americans support sending aid, then why would the U.S. follow through with stopping aid? Which tells me they probably won't, because so many Americans support sending aid. So that's good news for Ukraine, by the way. And apparently, people are not taking very kindly right now to what Putin's doing to the civilians, because he's launching daily attacks on civilians right now. And they're seeing that, and the people are waking up to it. And thanks to the word getting out there, and hopefully our channel is making a dent in that, people are waking up and seeing what's actually going on over there outside the political, garbage that keeps going on over and over and over, and people are seeing the truth. So I'm not surprised, or I'm actually surprised to hear it, but it's a very pleasant surprise to hear that. But Enforcer, what say you?
And there was actually a lot of interesting results that came out of these polls. And interesting, I want to say this because this is a fairly interesting one. These polls actually came from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute of Research, which generally does a great deal of public polling to try and figure out how in the world the public is feeling about a whole bunch of stuff. So to really quickly explain the point of what the Reagan Institute is doing here. The Reagan Institute was founded to generally try and give politicians an idea of what their constituents might be supporting. That's basically what it is. So they try and get the most accurate sorts of polling results from the public as possible. They don't try and have biased polls like you would see on, say, like Fox or CNN, where pretty much all respondents are, Republicans or Democrats, or they lean some way politically to where the answer will always be unanimous in one way or the other. They actually try and poll everyone to see what the entirety of the citizenry think on a specific topic or not. And what's quite interesting here is that these are all of the results that they got. This was published about 2 days ago, and finally really making it into the public circles today on their key findings. A record 64% of Americans say that the United States should be more engaged and take lead in international affairs instead of backing off and pretty much going into an isolationist stance in the Americas. And oddly enough, because the Reagan Institute, by the way, actually breaks this down by diplomatic affiliation, 79% of Republicans actually support being largely the world police, and 50% of Democrats support that as well. So generally showing a majority in both aisles of political thought within the citizens polled that they would like to see the United States is actually largely the world police, much like we support here on the channel as an American prerogative. All on top of that, according to the polling, 87% of the citizenry of the nation believe it is important for the United States to have the most powerful military in the world, and 71% agree peace is more likely when America is a strong conventional power. Around 68% of the public actually support developing the Golden Dome system, which is actually a little bit shocking to me, because I would say that that's honestly a bit of a sideshow and we ought to put that money in the Navy, but apparently that's actually a wide majority supported sort of an idea, is creating the Golden Dome. Export controls, 2/3 favor strict limits on advanced AI chip sales to China, which is, I gotta be honest, these poll results, honestly, a lot of them I really can't disagree with a lot, rather than the Golden Dome. I don't know why that many people are big into the Golden Dome. I'm personally thinking it's a bit of a gimmick and it'll probably end up being obsolete by the time it's put in service, but I gotta say, a lot of the American public, at least according to these polling results, are thinking fairly smart, actually. The size of the military, nearly 2/3, 64% of the population, say the U.S. military should be sized to fight and win 2 wars at once, including a significant plurality who support a force capable of defeating both China and Russia simultaneously, which is something that we've talked about here on the channel. Shipbuilding, nearly 9 in 10, 88%, believe the United States needs greater manufacturing capacity after learning of China's shipbuilding overmatch. Which ones? I gotta say, this polling result, man, honestly, man, this was like the LSA poll result here, like on every single category except for the Golden Dome. It's literally like the whole American public basically agrees with literally everything we say here on this channel. So we may as well be the voice of America at this point with what we say here, because practically the whole public, according to these polling results, pretty much supports exactly what we say here on the channel. And then on Ukraine.
True. Also, by the way, the one right here I do want to point out, though, that you're about to get to, the one about Ukraine, is it says a strong majority, 62%, want Ukraine to prevail in the war with Russia. I will say that's a little bit disheartening. Like, obviously, I'm glad that a majority of people believe that Ukraine should prevail over Russia, but it's disturbing to me that in America, which is democratic, about 38%, if you believe the poll, apparently want Russia to win, which is a dictatorial state. That's kind of incredible to see that 38% of people in America want to see a country like that win. That's kind of disheartening.
And what's interesting about that, folks, is that the strong majority, 62%, want Ukraine to prevail in the war with Russia, and 64%, which is actually more than the amount that want Ukraine to win, actually want to support the Ukraine by sending U.S. weapons, up 9 points from last year, which is a significant increase, and this is actually the largest result that's been seen by the Reagan Institute since they started polling at the very beginning of the war in 2022, with bipartisan gains. 59% of Republicans support these two positions, while 75% of Democrats support the two positions. Additionally, in Latin America, a majority, 62%, support using military force against suspected drug traffickers in Latin America and the Caribbean. And on Taiwan, if China invaded Taiwan, 60% would support committing U.S. forces to its defense, up 48% from last year, pretty much showing that the entire U.S. public has had a change in opinion, seeing the growing tensions with China, and have gone from being completely uninvolved and not wanting to support Taiwan to the large majority of the population actually believe that supporting Taiwan is an imperative defense prerogative. 77% believe it is important for the U.S. military to defend Taiwan Taiwan against Chinese aggression. And according to this is actually quite interesting. About NATO, favorability towards NATO has reached its highest level ever at 68%, with strong bipartisan support for Article 5 commitments. So actually showing
How is that the case? Like, if you really look at it, I'm not going to get political here, because we're trying to avoid doing that. But at the same time, how's that possible? Because there's a lot of bad mouthing of NATO in the public sphere right now in America. A lot of bad mouthing from leadership. So how are the numbers skyrocketing? Like, for example, NATO's favorability in America is skyrocketing to its highest level ever at 68%, with all the bad mouthing going on. It seems like it should be the opposite, but it looks like the bad mouthing is actually having the opposite effect.
I think honestly, Matt, that the bad mouthing is backfiring, because the bad mouthing is so, like, just to be honest with y'all, blatantly untrue about basically everything going on in the world right now, that a lot of people see through it pretty easily, because it's basically like used car salesman talk. And a lot of people can see through that pretty easy. So I think that's actually what's causing a lot of people to be like, actually, we're in support of NATO. We love NATO and we love everything else, because I think a lot of people are starting to realize the position that America will be in if we continue to move forward with this kind of foreign policy position that the current administration has, which is abysmally terrible in most every way. So I also got to say this, folks. This is quite interesting. When we generally start to criticize the U.S. government heavily, it is generally on one of these topics, and we lean exactly into what apparently the majority of the U.S. public wants to hear about what our foreign policy should actually be. So I got to say that whenever we are generally kind of more so crossing the threshold and heavily criticizing the current administration for foreign policy initiatives, while some people who, worship cults, which we dealt with in the last administration and this one, get pissed off, it appears that the majority of the population in the country would agree dead on with us on practically all of these topics, because I understand that the sample size was 2,500 people. So that's a pretty decently large polling group to be able to get from. And of course, they're not going to be able to poll millions. The Reagan Institute only has so many employees, and they're also doing this in person. And I also want to point that out, that that's a little bit important as well, before anyone says, oh, well, they could have faked the results. A Twitter poll is far easier to fake than this. They actually had to go up to 2,507 people in person and ask them about each of these topics and get their answers in person. So it's a lot harder to fib these results, which this is apparently what the American public actually believes, versus Twitter results, which can easily be fibbed, because you can have a whole bunch of people who aren't even Americans weighing into the conversation, or people who pretend like they're Americans that aren't Americans weighing in to completely skew the results on any poll on Twitter or elsewhere on the internet. So this is actually what the American public believes, and funnily enough, folks, we've been on this channel pretty much pushing hook, line, and sinker, towing the line for the whole American public on what they actually want in foreign policy on practically all of these topics, except for the Golden Dome, which is really the only one that I would go against the U.S. public on and be in the minority. But still, pretty crazy to see these sorts of results, and it is showing us that apparently a lot of people are not really liking the current foreign policy prerogatives that are being put forward right now, which I gotta say, I'm not at all a big fan of any of them either myself. But anyways, moving on from that, also, another thing I gotta say, folks, that's a little bit interesting about this, it seems as though people like Tucker Carlson and people like that, who have generally been weighing in support of the administration's current, more so isolationist sort of a policy, and also an anti-Western, anti-NATO, and more so pro-Russian and pro-Chinese and pro-authoritarian sort of a sentiment, have apparently been turning the public against that. I guess they see it for what it kind of is, and and now that people are talking about it and putting it more so in the spotlight, it's actually turning more people off of it than they're turning on to it.
Man, they're so stupid. They made people come around to common sense again. They're so stupid.
Man, honestly, man, they sat there, man, people were sitting there going, yeah, this is what I vote for, and then they saw what was happening, and they're like, honestly, I think we ought to be doing different. It's like, well, it damn well should, because it's like apparently, like, I gotta say, folks, those polling results really put a lot of hope in me for the U.S. public, because it actually shows that the U.S. public actually is smart and generally has a good bit of intuition to start turning their opinions around like this on key topics that truly are important to all of them and will have a massive impact on the citizenry. So good to see that they're intelligent and knowledgeable enough that when it actually comes around to making these calls and giving their opinions, they're generally giving opinions that are conducive to the best benefits of the nation and themselves in the long run when we make these calls. So anyways, With that, folks, moving on from that wild sort of a development right there, we are going to be moving on up into Kremenchuk, where we were able to see that, unfortunately, to have to change the tone here a little bit, the Russians actually did hit Kremenchuk last night with ballistic missiles that were carrying cluster rounds. We haven't seen cluster munitions used on cities, at least heavily like they were early on the war in Kharkiv up until recently, but it does appear that the Russians are bringing cluster munitions back into common usage against Ukrainian cities, with this clip here clearly showing those cluster rounds being used on Kremenchuk. And there's the flash of the cluster rounds going off. Using munitions on a populated area is generally very questionable, but using cluster munitions in what is a built-up area is a war crime, whether people are there or not. Using cluster rounds, you're generally to assume, according to the rules of war, that any built-up area must have civilians in it, and so this is a war crime directly. Incredibly unfortunate to see that the Russian Federation is once again conducting war crimes against the citizenry of the state of Ukraine, but it is good to know that the U.S. public is generally wising up to the foreign policy position that we're taking right now, and generally understanding that it's not within our best interest, nor is it in the best interest of our grand alliance that we've created and have prospered from for about the past 100 years. But with that, folks, it's time for us to move on up to Kyiv and get to the speech from the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on this day of the war. Hopefully it loads. How are y'all doing? Oh,
Feeling a little bit shy tonight. He said the website is taking a minute to load.
Oh, wow, this is a long speech here.
this is going to be a long speech, a real speech. And so I'm not even going to spend any time wasted trying to make a joke about the intro. Without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Speech!
Українці, українки. 6 грудня – великий день. День тих, хто, тримаючи зброю, доводить українську силу. День Збройних сил України. І це про тих, хто дійсно об'єднує наш народ у боротьбі, вдячності, в пам'яті і, звісно, об'єднує у великій повазі. Ця наша повага не лише у підтримці, молитвах, не лише в донатах і словах, які всі, безумовно, сьогодні напишуть своїм рідним воїнам, які є у кожному. Ця повага про дещо більше. Вона стала окремим явищем, феноменом нової України. Ця повага стала мистецтвом. І ця повага довкола нас, в наших містах, на наших вулицях і наших будинках. Це сотні зображень, які народились по всій Україні. Сотні присвячень, що поєднали в собі мільйони подяк тобі. Тобі, український воїне. І як важливо помічати ці мурали. Як важливо, поспішаючи у своїх справах, зупинитися хоча б на мить, пройти не повз, а поруч, вдивитися в ці малюнки, у ці очі, пам'ятати, що вони зробили у війні за незалежність України, цінувати, а для цього знати історію кожного. Того, хто захищав рідний Київ, а потім полетів на допомогу в заблокований Маріуполь. Або виріс на Донбасі та боронив столицю. Був світовим призером з джиу-джитсу, а став захисником України. Хто був всесвітньо відомим оперним співаком, а став українським воїном. І того, хто був ювеліром, мав, як кажуть друзі, золоті руки і цими руками знищував окупантів. Різні долі, однакові цінності, різні імена, однакова шана всім. Вони росли у різних містах, різних родинах, різних будинках, але всюди були виховані як справжні герої. І скільки в цьому символізмі гордості і болю водночас вони пішли захищати рідний дім, І сьогодні їхні портрети на стінах цих домів. І на школах, де вони мали різні оцінки, але навідмінно вивчили, що таке честь, відвага, людяність і любов. Любов до своєї України. Це точно знав Данило Погорілов, що мав астигматизм обох очей, але бачив, хто ворог і зло. А побратими бачили його мужність, коли він ціною життя вивів групу з оточення. Це знав Олег Фадєєнко, який мав понад 2 метри зросту і для побратимів був малиш. Звільняв Куп'янськ, Херсон. Для держави став Герой України. І Дем, що поліг у бою на наступний день після свого дня народження. І Тарас Березюк, який віддав життя за свободу у День Незалежності України. І я точно знаю, одного дня у мирному Києві, Харкові, Дніпрі, Львові, будь-де, в Україні, побачивши один з таких портретів, маленька дитинка спитає батьків: а хто це? І вони знатимуть, що відповісти. Вони точно розкажуть. І це точно продовжиться. І буде знову, і буде від покоління до покоління, бо ми назавжди збережемо цю пам'ять і повагу до своїх військових, до їхніх принципів, якостей, волі, міцності, впертості, до всіх найкращих чеснот. І ними дихає кожне таке полотно, кожен колір, відтінок, кожен штрих передає ці історії, ці вчинки, ці кроки. Це можна відчути. Це треба відчути. Відчути, як у 2014 році Віталій Трухан залишав інститут і їхав до зони АТО. Як, будучи весь час напередку, Олексій Остапенко казав дружині: хто ж, якщо не ми? Як Олексій Мовчан рятував з-під завалів 11 людей і котика. А Тарас Чайка зберіг свій екіпаж, і тепер його іменем названа аудиторія Національного університету. Стійте міцно, ви все, що в нас є. Цими словами я звертався до наших воїнів в перший день війни. І ви стояли міцно, стояли, коли в Україну майже ніхто не вірив, коли нам казали: у вас тиждень, у вас без шансів, у вас немає іншого варіанту, аніж здатись, а ви стояли. І ви стояли. І тому Україна стоїть, бо вірить у себе, бо себе поважає і себе захищає. І пліч-опліч з тими, хто зустрів вторгнення у лавах Збройних сил України, стали згодом сотні тисяч своїх. Українські чоловіки, українські жінки. Неймовірні, безстрашні, справжні. Перша військова, яка очолила підрозділ артилерії, снайперка, що знищила десятки окупантів. Кулеметниця, яка пішла на фронт у 19. Пташка, Тайра, Ксена, Руда і десятки тисяч хоробрих дівчат і жінок в ЗСУ. Всі, хто мав свої власні справи, але обрав одну – захищати рідну землю. І кожен, хто був тим, ким мріяв, але став тим, ким мусив. Воїном. Той, хто навчався в Академії культури, захистив рідний Харків. Хто мріяв бути істориком, добре знав картографію і завдяки чому вивів і врятував багатьох своїх побратимів. Хто грав на акордеоні, займався народними танцями, а став бойовим медиком і рятував життя. Хто знищив 7 ворожих літаків і є наймолодшим героєм України. Все це про наше життя, що поділилося на до і після 24 лютого. Хтось був підприємцем, вчителькою, фермером, дизайнеркою одягу. Хтось виховував 5 дітей, мріяв про навколосвітню подорож, мав успішний стартап. Ось що робить Росія. Б'є не лише по містах, вони руйнують мрії. Росія атакує не лише будинки, атакує долі і майбутнє. І не лишає вибору. І цей вибір на користь України було зроблено. Чорний. Міг працювати на залізній дорозі, але мав залізну волю і бився за країну на Харківщині та Донеччині. Йому назавжди 24. Крилов. Народився у Львові і захистив нас під Бахмутом. Йому назавжди 21. Бокс. Народився в Києві і захистив нас біля Запоріжжя. Йому назавжди 23. Та всі вони не пішли від нас, вони серед нас назавжди. У наших серцях, у наших віршах, у повідомленнях. Дякую. Дякую. Всім військовим України. Всім героям на стінах, які за Україну стали і стоять стіною, які разом Збройні сили України. Це більше, ніж військо, більше, ніж сім'я. Це уособлення нас з вами, всієї України. Того, за що ми боремось, як і чому. Коли немає більше чужих міст і сіл, кожне своє, кожне рідне. І кожен куточок України боронять бійці родом з кожного куточка України. Скільки імен, скільки вчинків, скільки ж правди у строках того, хто був поетом до війни і ним лишився на війні. І написав: спинися та прислухайся, приблудо, ця мова меч для тих, хто йде з мечем. Вертайся у своє, болотисте нікуди. Тебе ніхто сюди не кликав калачем. Ці слова, стримуючи окупантів з усіх боків, щодня втілюють у життя наші воїни. Історіями на полі бою, історіями сили та хоробрості. Скільки таких мужніх, скільки таких гідних, і не сотні, і не тисячі, безумовно, більше. Настільки, що не існує на планеті такої стіни і немає у світі стільки фарби, аби змалювати все, що зробили і роблять українські військові. Заради своїх дітей, батьків, коханих і кожної маленької дівчинки, яка майже щоночі в укритті. Заради України. Яка дорослішає, навчилась не боятись, яка не має права здатись, яка не забуде і не пробачить, яка гартується у боротьбі, яка одного дня знову розквітне, і яка заради цього об'єдналась. І єдність ця закарбована. І тому у Львові присвята Маріуполю і шлях додому. А Дніпро нагадує всім, якого ми роду. І кожен регіон України це знає. А кожен куточок світу це визнає. В Європі і США, на вулицях Берліну і Парижу, в Чехії, в Польщі, Британії, країнах Балтії. Всюди. Всюди, де говорять різними мовами, але свобода звучить однаково. Де знають, що синій і жовтий – це кольори сміливості. Де визнають у цій війні за незалежність України. Держава виборола своє право на життя і заслужила на чесний мир. Дорогі громадяни, дорогі ЗСУ, саме цьому боротьбі за справедливий мир для нас усіх присвячені і ці роки, і ці дні. Я дякую військовим, які на полі бою роблять все, аби Україна мала впевненість за столом переговорів. Мала гідність, мала сильні аргументи. Україна все це має. Бо має вас. Піхота, артилерія, розвідка, десант. Вдячний усім. Спецпризначенці, ракетні війська, танкісти, сили безпілотних систем, ССО, штурмовики. Цінуємо всіх. Інженери, зв'язківці, кібербезпека, медичні війська, кожен бойовий медик, кожен, хто рятує, логістика, повітряні і морські сили, всі, хто закриває наше небо, всі, хто діпстрайками повертає зло додому в Росію, всі наші роди військ. Пишаємось усіма. Кожним і кожною, хто кожного дня, на кожному напрямку захищає Україну, чию відвагу бачимо, а захист відчуваємо. Хто на нулі, викладається на всі 100, хто змінив власне життя, аби життя незмінно було в Україні. Кожен і кожна воїни, кожен і кожна герої. Кожного і кожну я вітаю з Днем Збройних Сил України. Вічна слава вам, вічна пам'ять тим, хто віддав за Україну своє життя. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And Ram Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, here on day 1,382 of the war. And I have to say that that was one hell of a speech, and also those paintings were some of the best I have ever seen in the world. Really an honor to the armed forces of Ukraine and those soldiers who've laid down their lives over the past 1,382 days to defend the Ukrainian state, the Europeans, and generally the entirety of the Western world against continuous Russian aggression. But with that, folks, that is actually going to be rounding out our news segment for the night and moving us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And boy, howdy, folks, is it always a fun segment to get into. We can talk about just about literally anything and everything in the segment, except for religion, politics, climate change, or whether or not the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare. But we will be getting into every single question that we can, of course, starting the time now. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night. Also, that was a really good speech by Zelensky, by the way. He occasionally puts out like a really long one like that, a real winning speech per se. So that was a good one right there. Also, by the way, I just got to say, like, it is beyond irritating. Like, I hate to like go into it, folks. I have to say it though, because it irritates the hell out of me. Like, I find Zelensky, who's not even the leader, he's obviously the leader of Ukraine. He's not the leader of the United States, obviously. He is more inspirational than any leader that we have currently. That's something right there. That's honestly something. He's literally fighting for his life, his country's life, basically for the entirety of Europe right now at this point. And a very inspirational speech there, I must admit. I wish our people had that in them. But anyways, jumping into our super chat questions here, our first one is going to go to none other than Brian Maddox. And Brian put in a massive $300 support to the channel. And thank you very much, Brian, for a absolutely massive support right there. Extremely generous. And we do appreciate that very, very much. And Brian said, love you guys. And how is the business set up in Utah? And when you were getting ready to move, you said something about more access to supports. And can you elaborate at all? And keep doing what you do and LSA.
And LSA, and a huge thanks to you for the unbelievably massive support, Brian Maddox. And thank you so much for the kind words. We love you too, and the whole of the LSA. And the business setup in Utah is a little bit different as far as the supporting stuff that we can get out here, which is also a bit of a motivator for us to get on out to Utah instead of staying in Alabama. One thing that we very rarely touch on in the forefront, but is something that actually takes up a lot of administrative and clerical work in the background, at least up until now, was doing taxes every year. And crazily enough, you wouldn't believe it, but in the entire state of Alabama, there was not a single person who was willing to take on doing taxes for a YouTuber, because there's basically no YouTubers in Alabama. So crazily enough, there's actually such like infrastructure for doing taxes for YouTubers that's out here in Utah that wasn't out there. So we would have to do all of that by hand every single year, which would take a lot of time because, you know, we had to make sure that we were doing it correctly. So that's one of the things that's kind of a more existent thing out here than it was there. But outside of that, there's just a whole bunch of other stuff that supports us out here if we want to start expanding into further projects. Like, for example, if we ever wanted to get into any sort of studio work, there's actually recording studios here that didn't exist in Alabama. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff too in Salt Lake City that just did not exist as far as doing a YouTube based business that didn't exist in Alabama. So generally that's some of the big stuff that actually is fairly different out here. And that is why, folks, Utah was also a pretty good pick. Honestly, just to be honest with y'all, folks, it wasn't really Utah because basically everywhere but Alabama had those resources, but Alabama didn't. So it made a lot of our behind the scenes work a lot more difficult and complicated because on literally everything we had to go through and research everything, become an expert on it, and then do it by hand, no matter what it was. And we couldn't ever try and outsource anything. So it made it incredibly laborious to do literally anything at all. Even including merchandising, which is what we're still trying to look into right now. There's actually people in Salt Lake City who we can directly work with and actually go to their facilities that can do merchandising, while in Alabama we also had to pretty much build our own infrastructure and do everything else in between to actually make our own merchandise store possible there. So there's just like a million different things behind the scenes stuff that a lot of people might not really see or might not really know how much work was going into it, that becomes far more easier and streamlined now that we're out here in Salt Lake City instead of being in Birmingham, Alabama. So I hope that does address that.
Also, Utah seems to be very low touch with businesses too. Like they seem to be very business friendly, which is a good thing. Alabama made everything complicated. Not trying to just diss on them, but I mean everything was complicated. Sales taxes were complicated. Pretty much anything you want to do was complicated. And also, there was a lack of professionals that really knew what they were doing, like in various different topics that you could really call on to hire them to help with a business. There was a lack of that in Alabama. So Utah's got all those resources. Plus, the government seems business friendly. So that's all a positive thing, to be honest. And also, Utah's pretty much modern with everything. So if you need to like do something for your business, most of it can be done online instead of having to go in person and have someone not know what you're talking about pretty much on anything. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah, that's a positive thing, honestly, because sometimes, folks, we would call up folks around here, well, not here, but in Alabama, with things that we would need to get done, and they would listen to what we would need to get done, and then one of them did the stupidest thing ever. They started going, hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello? And then when we called them back, hello, this is so-and-so. How can I help you? Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, yeah, I was just wanting to call back and talk about, hello? Hello, and they were literally doing it deliberately because they just didn't want to do it and they didn't want to say it. And it was like, okay, that's just stupid. It's like it would be a lot better if they would just say, yeah, well, I can't do that, and we'd be like, okay, thank you, instead of wasting our time thinking that we had a call that was dropping when it clearly wasn't dropping. But beyond that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And also, thank you so much for the support, Brian Max. I just saw you threw in another comment. Really glad to hear about the supports. Do what is the best of your time and outsource what you can. Love it and congrats. Oh yeah, and I got to thank you so much massively for the support. And outsourcing a lot of the behind the scenes work is really a big thing for us, because doing this show, a lot of people laugh and say that YouTubers don't really do much. And for a lot of YouTubers in specific categories like gaming and stuff like that, that's really heavily entertainment based and there isn't really a lot of pre-prep to be done. I mean, that is quite easier than what we do. So, I guess some people could say it in that sense. But with what we do, there is a lot of work and effort into everything, especially on a day when there's a stream. A stream takes about 7.5 hours of my time every day. So it is pretty much a full-time job. And then if there's a short or video added onto that, that can add another 2.5 hours. So some days I'm spending about 9 or 10 hours nearly just working on YouTube-related stuff, videos and streams. And then Matthew's spending a fairly considerable amount of time, somewhat similar to that, on behind the scenes stuff, and then also the show and short war videos as well. So whenever we can outsource anything, it's incredibly beneficial, because we already have a lot of our days taken up just running the head-end part of the business that y'all all see, where you get to hear what we're saying about the news and what's going on around the world. So I got to thank you so much for being happy about that. We are more than happy about that, especially out here. And hopefully out here, folks, because there is still some ideas floating around. I can't guarantee this will ever happen, but there's always been an idea floating around that Matthew and me will eventually make our own side channels kind of attached to this one. And we'll both go off and kind of do our own things. And, not like, split at the channel and end the channel, but kind of go off and do our own things and make our own special documentaries and videos about stuff we find interesting. And kind of make them like an Enforcer or Enforcer Matt sort of special. It wouldn't be incredibly common that those videos would come out, but they come out here and there. And there is a lot of supporting stuff that can help us to do those sorts of things here in Salt Lake City that never existed in Alabama. And if we tried to do something like that in Alabama, we would have to do everything solo, or we would have to try and jimmy rig a way to do it, and it probably wouldn't really work, because that's basically what happened with the Browns Ferry documentary that was never made. Is that we had to do it on our own and kind of try and jimmy rig it the best we could, and it just never would come together. Out here in Salt Lake City, there's actually people that we could hire and bring on for about a day or maybe a day or two to do most of the camera work, where we're just kind of in front of the camera and they're doing all that side of things, and then we can actually make that a much more streamlined operation. It would cost more, it wouldn't be free.
I don't think you know how much it costs, actually. That's the first time you told me about hiring a camera crew. I don't think you know how much that costs.
Well, no, not a camera crew, just a cameraman. Like, camera crew is way beyond
That's
budget.
still expensive.
But beyond that, it's something that we can do out here that we could not have done in Birmingham. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. A huge thanks to you once again, Brian Maddox, for that unbelievably humongous support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to Joseph Carr, who puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Joseph, for that $50 support as well. We do appreciate that. Very generous, of course. And Joseph said, I agree with your assessment with regards to why we give so much to Israel and dump on Ukraine. I'm not against Israel, but I am against hypocritical policies. And this administration is using Ukraine as a whipping post for appeasement to Russia. Also, Joseph, I share your sentiment. I share your sentiment too. I'm not against Israel either. I'm against unfair treatment. That's what I'm against. Just like you're saying, that's something there that seems to be something that people don't understand. Is just because we say that we find it hypocritical that the U.S. is just freely handing weapons to Israel and then also bashing Ukraine on the side when they're both equally important, in my opinion, that's ridiculous. It's not that I hate Israel or something. It's just I want them to be treated with priority and fairness. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree, and that's something I gotta say, that's something that really is very annoying to deal with in the modern day. Because if you say something like, "Why in the world can Israel get bombs prioritized and shipped to them via Amazon Prime," basically in DoD senses, and everyone else gets put on hold? Like the thing that aggravates me about this situation that exists right now is that Israel is not the most important thing going on in the world. And it also is being prioritized over everything else, like there isn't anything else going on that could be more pressing right now. And those two things annoy me, because it's not just the fact that we're supporting, like I have nothing against supporting Israel, but I would have to agree the hypocritical treatment is what gets me incredibly aggravated and gets me to point that out, because throughout from 2023 onwards, we've always been saying that the United States and Israel have common strategic interests in fighting and defeating proxy forces of Iran and also fighting Iran. But at the same time, I'm also not blind, like other people are that are in the U.S. government right now, to where Israel is the most important thing on the planet, and we can literally give everything else up except for giving bombs to Israel. Because the truth be told, right now, giving bombs to Israel is one of the least important things that we could be doing at the moment compared to everything else going on in the world. We have a major war in Europe that's affecting our largest trading partner, which is the European Union. We have the Chinese growing a force and preparing to invade Taiwan, which produces all of the semiconductors in the world. And in turn, we are giving bombs to the Israelis, prioritizing that topic over the other two. And the only thing that Israel exports to the world or to us is cut diamonds and some guns. They don't even give the guns to us. They just sell those to everyone else. They buy our stuff, and then they make their own stuff, and then they sell that to other people. So out of the three, $1 trillion trade economy possibly being affected that we're directly connected to the hilt being affected, versus all of the semiconductors in the West basically also being taken over by the communists, and then Israel making some cut diamonds and selling some guns to people, and for some reason that one's the one that's taking priority all of the others. Like, I can tell you all this, we cannot survive without the European economy as a nation. We cannot survive without Taiwan semiconductors. One thing that we can do fine without for a short while is Israeli cut diamonds. So, like, that's just honestly the truth of it. That's not the most important strategic asset that we have on the planet. There's a lot of other pressing things going on, and I just don't know why in the world that is always being prioritized as the 100% priority. And then also when you bring it up, it's like everything else these days. When you bring up, hey, why in the world are we giving those bombs to Israel when we could be giving them to Ukraine instead? They clearly need them more than Israel right now. then you get a whole bunch of stupid stuff thrown at you, like you hate Israel or you're an anti-Semite or something. It's like, it's none of that at all. It's nowhere close to that. It's like, I'm perfectly fine with being an ally of the Israelis because we have a common interest in defeating Iran, but at the same time, we can't act like that's the most important thing going on the planet all the time, 24/7, because it's not. But I do thank you massively for the support. I would agree with that sentiment completely, because I don't really like hypocritical treatment. I'd say we could support them both, and we have been for quite a while. We can support the Ukrainians with arms and equipment just like we do the Israelis. And what a lot of people don't realize here is that that's not hurting us at all. That's only helping us out. You know, arms productions and companies have to up their manufacturing here in the United States. They have to hire on more workers. They have to build out their assembly lines. They're making more money. Those employees are making more money. They're spending that money, and not only that, they're paying taxes. So all around, that's a huge benefit to the United States of America to sell weapons to both Ukraine and Israel. And also, I would say that as far as the arms provisions go, this is another thing that I don't really like. The Ukrainians should be getting the weapons for free from the United States via the taxpayer. They are giving us a huge benefit right now, because when they hit the Russians with a 155 millimeter shell and wipe out a squad, they are doing that at a far cheaper price than we ever could have if we had to do that ourselves in a major war, because we didn't meet the Russians at the head. So they should get it for free because it's basically an investment. I don't really know why the Israelis get weapons for free to the tune of about $25 billion a year, considering that they have a $25 billion military budget, and we give them another $25 billion out of taxpayers' money every single year. I don't really understand that. I think that, to be entirely honest with y'all, considering that the Israelis are in a far more advantageous position than the Ukrainians are, and also considering that everyone wants to always talk about trying to balance the budget, if anyone ought to be buying weapons in the world from the United States, it ought to be the Israelis. I don't know why they get a free lunch on a large amount of U.S. weapons that are provided to them annually. That should be something that they're paying for, because it's not a position where they're directly, like we told them, okay, go to war with Iran and wipe out Khamenei and his whole government for us. And now, if we said that to them, then I would say you get all the free weapons you want, because they're doing the job for us. But they're not doing that. They do everything on their own free will, like they went and bombed the Qataris on their own free will. So why in the world are they getting a free lunch on U.S. weaponry, and they don't even follow the rules we have when we give the weapons to them? So they ought to be paying for them. Like, that's what I would say. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I completely agree with the ideas that you have there and the statements that you made. I'm all 100% in support of having Israel as an ally of the United States, along with Ukraine. But I also don't like the idea of unfair treatment, and that's what has me pointing this out over and over on air. It's like, isn't it funny that lives are sacred and no lives can be wasted unless if it's the Israelis needing to bomb Hezbollah, and then we can give them a whole bunch of bombs, and they can drop a bomb in Dahia and wipe out the Hezbollah guys and also about 10 civilians, and those lives were worthless. But when it comes to one Russian life, then that's worth more than anything on the planet, which makes no sense to me. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Huge thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Joe Little. And thank you very much, Joe, for that $50 support as well. And we do appreciate that. Very generous. And Joe said, friendly reminder for the enforcers, you can leave the hood, but the hood doesn't leave you. Honestly, Joe, the hood was always down the street. Like, we didn't live, like, literally in the hood. And when we say a hood, it depends on who you're talking to. Because if you ask about here in Utah, then we lived in the trenches. But in reality, though... Yeah, but in reality, though, we were living in, like, I would say, well, I will say this: when we lived in Montgomery when we were really young, that was the hood. And when we moved to Wetumpka, which is outside of Montgomery, we moved into a normal neighborhood. But once you left the neighborhood, it was like you went into like almost a war zone. Like, once you left it and went back to Montgomery, very dangerous. I almost got carjacked there, had to like defend myself in that situation. I mean, it was a lot of stuff that was happening. Also, just a free-for-all at the high school, and the whole school system we went to was like a free-for-all. So honestly, the hood doesn't leave. I'll be honest with you, I will never forget my childhood growing up. A lot of decent memories, but honestly, there were some interesting ones in there as well. So the hood doesn't leave you. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that, in my opinion, it was It was pretty bad down there in Alabama. I mean, it was rough. Like what they call the hood out here in Utah is nowhere close to the hoods that existed in Alabama. I mean, the hood in Alabama was the hood. It's like what you hear about in Chicago or Detroit or something like that. It's literally to that level. Like, what's crazy is that everybody would always talk about, man, it can't have in Detroit, something like that. And then we would look at like Detroit and we'd be like, wow, that's not really far off from here. Like that's like here is really close to being Detroit. And so it's a little bit interesting with that growing up in a place like that. Honestly, we came out not too worse for wear. I would say if you ask me, do you want to go back and relive your childhood? I'd probably say no, really. I'd probably say no because there was a lot of good memories, sure, but honestly, like going to school, we always stuck out. We were like picked on to hell, bullied to hell. Really, didn't really have. I personally didn't really have a great big pool of friends. Usually, most people tried to just diss on me endlessly. And the only time they'd be nice to me, folks, is when they needed help with their history homework. That was the only time anyone would ever be nice to me in school. And that was basically the only experience that we had growing up because outside of that, it was so dangerous everywhere that once kids went home from school, they hardly got out and went anywhere unless it was like a play date arranged by their parents, which was seldom and few and far in between. So that was, I would honestly say, I would probably pass on it again. But I would have to say that out here, these people have got it so good. Honestly, I'm happy that they're spoiled. I think it's a good thing that they're spoiled. They have very high standards. They talk about potholes in the road, and there's like no potholes in the road out here kind of standards. And I think that is a great thing that they have that because I would hate to know that everyone in America had to grow up in the kind of place that we grew up in. Because then there wouldn't really be a silver lining to what the United States is and how great it is. Out here in Salt Lake, from Ogden to Provo, it's a very nice place all around. So I do think
they're not really spoiled. They're not really spoiled per se. This should be the standard, like the way it is out here. It should be standard across America. That's like this. It's really a pity that it's not because when we say spoiled, it's like should people accept for example a rough environment as standard? I would say no. It's become standard to be in a rough environment. Like most places in America have become pretty rough. Like especially when you go to downtown city environments, it's gotten very rough. A lot of crime, a lot of danger, and a lot of really bad mindsets too. A lot of gang violence and stuff happening in like cities these days. It's pretty rough. I know there are definitely places you could have it worse though. Like I've seen places that had it way worse than we had it. But our place wasn't great. Like growing up, I'll admit it was not very good. It was very depressing. I'll say that, very depressing growing up because Montgomery was the city. Like if you wanted to go to the city, you had to go to Montgomery, and Montgomery was dangerous. Honestly, our parents didn't even want us going to Montgomery because it was so dangerous. They were always worried that something was going to happen, and one or two times something did almost happen. But we were smart enough, and the street smart enough to get our way out of it. But Wetumpka wasn't that much better off, to be honest. A lot of very, it's a mindset problem. It's like a very violent, sort of ignorant culture around it. It's all the only way I can describe it. It's just a lot of. It's not very like. I don't want to bash the place. There were good people in Wetumpka. There's not just bad people all over the place there, but it was a really bad like mindset that was prevailing there. That wasn't like a forward-looking mindset. It was kind of like a stagnant, like stuck in the past type deal. That wasn't very motivating.
I would have to say that in my personal experience of being in Wetumpka, which Matthew and me grew up there together, of course, we're brothers. I would have to be honest with y'all. I don't really have that positive of an outlook on Wetumpka at all, which was the town that we basically grew up in. We were technically pretty much, our hometown is Montgomery technically, but really it's more so Wetumpka because that's pretty much where we grew up most of our lives when we were kids. But Wetumpka was basically like a mini Montgomery. Montgomery is an absolute hellhole. You can ask anyone who's been there and they can tell you it is. That's funny though. It's very ironic, folks, because you'll hear stuff in like the political circles about, oh, Chicago's bad, no, Portland's bad. You never hear about Montgomery. You never do. You never hear about any southern town, honestly. And these southern cities, I mean, hell, folks, I'll be honest with you, I think they're actually more dangerous than Portland. I've been through Portland. Portland was all right until you made it in downtown. Montgomery was a battle royale, literally from the very city limit to the downtown and out. There was very few places where it was actually safe at all, or even relatively safe. I mean, hell, there was even gang-related shootings that were happening by the time we were moving out here in this little open area mall. This was considered to be the nicest part of town by the time we were leaving. It's East Chase Mall, and I think there was a gang shooting or two that had happened in here by the time we were moving out. And that place was even becoming dangerous, but it was like that through the whole city. And then Wetumpka was a lot similar because you would have in like the school system. Let me take this off screen so I can refresh it and get that little blue deal off of the bottom. There we go. You would have these people who moved from Montgomery up there to Wetumpka because their kids had gotten into the gangs in the schools in Montgomery. You remember this, man, because this started to happen a lot by like late middle school and high school. They would move out of the Montgomery school system because their kids had literally been kicked out of the school system permanently in Montgomery because they were a part of the gangs and getting involved in bad stuff. And then they move up to Wetumpka and they just bring that there. So by the time we were go ahead.
I got worse stories than that though. Like I knew a guy that went to a public school in Montgomery. I can't remember which one it was, but he said he went there. He apparently showed up. He got stabbed like on his first day there because he wasn't in a gang. He got stabbed, and then he had to leave the entire school because he got stabbed because he wasn't in a gang. Also, I believe there's metal detectors. I'm not sure they still have them at the schools down there, but they had metal detectors at one point where they were scanning all the students going in the door because kids were bringing guns like into there all the time because it was getting that bad. They were having to treat the place like a prison. Like they were literally treating the students like inmates in a prison. And that was pretty common. Like everybody just knew, like you could not go to the public schools in Montgomery if you weren't in a gang or if you weren't willing to defend yourself. You just could not go because it wasn't safe. So you really had no option. If you wanted to send your kid to a public school, you pretty much had to go outside of it. You had to go to like a suburb like Wetumpka or something like that, or go to a private school to get away from that.
Yeah, it was bad. I mean, it was really bad. And even up at our school, it was pretty rough too. I mean, like endless fights. Like it was like a prison. You would hear about the fights before they'd happen, and then they'd happen, and everyone would be almost placing bets on who would get their ass beat by the other. And there was crazy people who would show up to the school with guns in their backpacks, and they had to put the whole school on lockdown and call in the SWAT team because there was supposed to be a gang shooting in the school that day, or at least someone was planning to, and then they'd stop it. And then there at one time in middle school in 8th grade, there was actually this crazy parent who had called up to the middle school because they had lost custody of their kid, and they pretty much threatened to wipe out everyone in the school administration and as many students as they could if they didn't get their kid. So they had to call in the whole SWAT team for that with the MP5s and everything, and have the whole school on lockdown for the entire damn day, longer than the school day even, because they were scared this guy was going to show up and start wiping out kids and teachers alike. And it was just like that all the time. It was literally just endless. And then the teachers would treat most kids, us included, as basically like prisoners in a prison system. So you'd be treated kind of like garbage by most teachers. And then and what was kind of weird is that the worst off kids, like the kids with the worst problems that acted like the biggest assholes to everyone, the teachers would gravitate towards them and like them the most and give them the most preferential treatment, but everyone else would be treated like garbage. So it wasn't really a good time.
It was so broken. It was so broken. I will say, I can't say anything positive about the school system we went to. Like that school system was shit. Like I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It was a disgrace. That school system was. There was literally hardly any oversight whatsoever of keeping the place actually in order. They actually took pride in just sort of like acting like it was a prison. Took pride in it, and treated everybody like crap. Honestly. It was disgraceful. And also, you know, I think Alabama deserves its rap when people say, oh, the school system in Alabama is not good. There are a few places where it is good, like in the very wealthy areas of Alabama, which are very small and very isolated. But outside of that, I mean, the school systems are in tough shape.
And someone said, I think I saw 2 students fight once during my whole time I was in school. I think I saw 2 students fight in about less than a week most of the time, honestly. I
saw fights all the time. Fights all the time too. I knew one guy that I was actually in my same grade that one day apparently left school, and I guess he was involved in a gang, I guess, or something. He left school and he went to go meet up with this other guy who was having a problem with. They ended up getting into a shootout right down the road. So then there was a whole I think there was a whole murder trial. I'm not sure what turned into that, but it was a whole thing with that, and that wasn't uncommon either. Like leaving school and violence happening afterwards, that was all the time. I mean, that was pretty frequent.
Yeah, I mean, that was wildly frequent. That was to the point everyone would be like, "Oh, someone else got in another shooting again." And everyone would be like, "Oh man, that's crazy." And then it was just that. That was that. That was the end of it. So, I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's crazy, folks, to see how people react to this in the chat, because y'all all react to it like we were basically in a prison camp, basically, and we pretty much were, as far as schools go. I've never heard of stories this bad in my life. Whenever I recount the stories of our childhood growing up and how it was in the schools and everything, I've never heard anyone say that they've even come close to that. So that's why I wouldn't want to go back and relive it, because most of our lives, if we weren't just sitting at home twiddling our thumbs waiting to do something, we were just in school, because that was all you could do. And I wouldn't want to go and relive that, because it was not a fun time at all. And also, I don't know what it was about the whole deal either, but no matter what, it Matthew and me, not trying to make it a victim complex here, but we would be singled out all the time by teachers and the like to make sure that we were put down as much as possible. Like in middle school band, in all the stuff that we did, literally anything, there would be someone there who was just practically gunning to make sure that we weren't doing well, although we were. It was just the most bizarre sort of a thing. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. A big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And folks, the folks you listen to here on the channel, the ones that sound well polished and articulated and sound like they kind of have radio voices, we grew up in the trenches. Crazily enough, apparently we grew up in the trenches.
We weren't in the trenches. I wouldn't go that far, but we weren't in a gentle environment. Let's just put it that way. It definitely wasn't a gentle environment for sure. It was a very rough, very abrasive environment, and there was no break from it. It was 24/7. So I would definitely wouldn't want to relive that. But we weren't in the trenches, though. I wouldn't go that far.
Oh no, I'm just exaggerating a little, but we didn't have it easy. It wasn't easy. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to OK State 42, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Mr. OK State, for that support as well. And he said, I want to get both your thoughts on very recent news that allegedly Turkey will be let back into the F-35 program as an operator and parts producer with a plan to divest their S-400 system and hopefully to Ukraine and USA to study. Now, that actually wouldn't be a bad idea, honestly, OK State. I know some people would be like, well, you can't trust Turkey. They like to do Turkey things. They like to ride the fence. That is true. But at the same time, though, the best way to rein Turkey in is to let them have a couple of perks. For example, let them back into the F-35 program. And that way, that can be used as leverage later on. So if Turkey starts acting stupid again, we can just tell them, hey, look, if you like that F-35 program that you have, you might want to chill out. And that usually pulls a little bit of weight. So I don't think it's a bad idea, personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say it doesn't sound like that bad of an idea, honestly. But at the same time, I would also say that we do have to be, I think we should watch the Turkish position for a little bit longer and see what they're really going to be doing, because we don't want to put the F-35 in the hands of a country that might end up being strategically questionable. But it doesn't sound like a bad idea, but I think we should give it a little bit of time before we try and implement that and watch the Turks for a little bit longer to see what they're really about. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Monty, who puts in a 20 as well. And thank you very much, John, for that support. And he said, Russia, please cease this senseless war and return back to your country and live. Stay, and nothing good will happen.
I'd agree, and nothing good is happening to them. About 1,100 Russians are learning that one every day. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to the Jake MC1, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much to Jake MC for that support. He said, hello, it's me, just a plumber's brother. Oh, hello there. He said, stop listening to me, shower, weirdo. Oh, I thought he maybe misspoke or something. Interesting. He said also, have you guys have you ever used the create mod in Minecraft? You can build functioning trains.
I've heard about people tell me about that. I've never tried it myself. I'm not really one for mods on most games. It gets way over my pay grade and abilities pretty quickly. But I have heard about it, and I've seen a lot of people on YouTube make those trains out of the create mod before, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Like, that's so neat that they're able to do that. But I personally haven't myself. But a big thanks to you so much for the support, and also being just a plumber's brother. That's really cool to have both of y'all here on the air at the same time. And a massive thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
You know, very fascinatingly enough, actually got a little bit of my very basic coding knowledge from actually doing Minecraft modding and working on servers and things like that. That actually sparked my interest in learning more about, like, for example, like web design, basic coding. And when I say basic, I mean very basic. If you told me to like code something in C++ or something right now, I'd be like, couldn't do that for you. But something really basic though, I could probably pull off. But I used to do modding in Minecraft back when I was heavy into that, like when I was much younger. I was very heavy into that. I could literally build a decked out Minecraft server with pretty much any mod you wanted, like crazy ones, and actually make it work, which is pretty cool. I think the Enforcer remembers that.
Yeah, I think I do. And I think you used to add the plugins to the servers too.
Yeah, I used to do that. I used to do the whole kit and caboodle and stuff like that, all the little hacks and stuff like that. Minecraft's a good gateway to like getting into like modifying software and stuff like that.
Man, you know, man, I still sit here and I lament that we lost that Discord. Oh, not the Discord, but the Minecraft server that we had from a long, long time ago, where I built the entire National Mall, including the Capitol building, the White House, and all that stuff. And it just disappeared, and we don't know where it is. And the YouTube video I made of it's gone too. Like, that doesn't exist anymore either. So that is so sad, man, because that was a really cool server, honestly.
That was pretty cool. I'll be honest. Also, back in the day too, like I was experimenting around. I did all this stuff. Like I had an really old computer that I was given because somebody was going to throw it out. So I had this really old computer. I turned into a server, and I was like, I think it was like 16 or 17 or something when I was doing all this stuff. I was also into like microcontrollers, like Arduinos and things like that. I was doing the whole thing. I actually got a little like editor's award because I made like a smart traffic light model system. It was like a little model traffic light system for like a diorama kit, and it changed the lights and everything like that based on like a program I created for it. So I actually got an editor's award. I think it was on Instructables for that. I can't remember what it was, but I had posted and I got a little thing for it. But I remember I had like the whole Minecraft server thing. I was playing around with like trying to take down my own Minecraft server and stuff like that, like with a little sneak attack, a DDoS attack. In other words, I was playing around with that whole thing. So that was all fascinating stuff. But I think I ended up running that old computer. I think it got ruined for it's over with, but it was fun though. Also, I saw Halb Shatten Morker. He said nowadays it's all automated with mod packs. That's lame. Now that's lame now because that was something there that made you had to think about what you were doing, like when you have to do that manually. Now it's all automated. That's lame. That takes away all the fun from it.
Man, that's so damn lame. And but with that, I hope that doesn't address that well about the mods. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Duncan VR, who puts in a $25 support. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support all the way from Australia. And Duncan said, hello there, and baba moo, woof quack, for the pizza fun. And how the marmot sound when he eats pizza. Bring out the marmot.
Hey, bring out the marmot. We actually got time for that tonight. We actually got time for it. And we're going to do it. We're going to do it. We got to go get him. We got to go get the marmot. We got to go get a marmot with a branch of plums by Jacopo Lugosi. 1605. Oh, hello there. Hey!
Oh, hello there, Governor. It's good to see you again on the block. He's not from the trenches, but he's from an abrasive environment. The environment where you get the sponge and you flip it over on the abrasive side and you scratch it to death. That type of environment, you know, the really rough one. The one where people walk around and they take pride in causing pain and suffering and agony. It's almost like a Russian, but it's Alabama. Maybe that's why they relate. But anyways, tell us more, Fly.
Aw, man. I didn't grow up in the trenches. I had an adoptive family, and that means that I was probably raised pretty well, but then I acted like shit just because. Aw, man. I made a 2.0 GPA. That's why I had to go join the army. Oh man, 95 Alpha shifting those gears. They don't even have gear shifters in the Army trucks, by the way. It's just drive, park, and reverse. But beyond that, I gotta say a big thanks to you so much for the support, Duncan, and putting in that super chat for the Marmot. We love the Marmot. Alan the Marmot is a facet of this show, and I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep running.
Wait a minute. Marion Demo says just a huge rat. It's just a big rat. That's what Marion said. Yeah, honestly, it's a big rat. It's like a nutria, but it's a little bit fluffy. That's all. Look at it. A big rat.
Oh, you rat! Man, honestly, dude, the painter was told it was like a big rat, and he took it literally. He was like, a big rat, you say? And he painted this thing up. It really does look more like a rat than a marmot, really.
Yeah, it's like a big, it's like a big rat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it has a lot more in common with a rat than anything else, really. But it is our marmot. This is our marmot. And I got to thank you so much for the support.
My soul rat, like Bill just said. That's my soul rat.
My soul rat. Man, bruh, I love this rat. Man, like, dude, this rat has built a whole like joke around it, man. This rat right here, man, this is the rat with the fur, man. This one's got the fur. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And I gotta say, Duncan VR, we're always more than happy to have you here supporting this channel and letting us have a little bit of a segment with Alan the Marmot and the Fly. And I gotta thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And also, Matthew, you know something serious though? I'm telling you, man, like that little skit thing that I did right there on the hot dog, man, that is 100% true. Because it's like, if he grew up in any place like we grew up in, he wouldn't be driving around harassing the ICE people right now, because he would know that harassing anyone could result in you possibly getting shot, and it's not worth it. So just keep your head down and don't mess with anyone and just leave people alone. Like, I can tell you, man, that's that was the whole source of things with him. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. There was no commentary there. It was just a monologue there, and then I had to kind of like make sure that the dead space wasn't recognized. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ride for Life, also known as Char G, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Char G, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. He said, hello, boys. I went to In-N-Out today and thought I should pop in and say thank you for your hard work. And there's some high standards in your collective work ethic, and I appreciate that.
And we thank you, Right Guy SR, for the In-N-Out Fund and greatly appreciating our work ethic, because we try our best. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible, or have a taste of an In-N-Out burger, or live in the land of In-N-Outs. This actually isn't the land of In-N-Outs, that's California, but still, it was kind of close, you know, it was kind of close. And I gotta say, a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing rolling. So a humongous thanks to you so much once again, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Marion, as well, for that support. We do appreciate that. And they said, thanks to the brothers. And we are informed about what's going on in the world. And thank you.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because it is folks like you who help us to make this thing a reality and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Waba, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Waba, as well. He said, glory is fleeting, but Slayer is forever. Napoleon Bonaparte.
I don't think he said that. Like, I'm not sure if he said that. But I do thank you for the support and sharing an interesting quote with us. We will remember that one, and we will attribute that to Napoleon Bonaparte. Not because it's accurate, just because it's funny. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Robert Krogan, who puts in a 10. And Robert said, good evening, LOC enforcers, and here's for a coffee. I bet it's cold there.
Oh, it's not too cold, actually. Today it was like, I think like 50, pretty much. It wasn't too cold to me, honestly. But I do thank you for support, and we will have a coffee or a hot chocolate, or at least some kind of a warm drink. It would be nice to have, you know, because out here in the cold of the Salt Lake, you've got to have that. You know, folks, all the mountains around here are actually covered in snow practically to the base. Interesting enough, the city has like no snow in it. but all of the mountains surrounding the city are literally covered in snow practically all the way down to the city itself. It looks really cool, actually. It looks like we're living in a winter wonderland sort of a place now, like the Alps. So it's really neat, honestly. It got me really excited. I was like, wow. I was like, look at that. I was like, we are like practically out in the Alps now. But anyways, a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Alan Orchard, who puts in a 10. And Alan does not leave a comment, though. But thank you very much, Alan, for that $10 support. And we do appreciate it. We also have a 10 from Lambo. He said the Coast Guard has been doing that for years against Venezuela and Colombia. And the Ford has been on R&R in the area and since Monday and left today towards Venezuela.
Thank you for the support, and that is actually true. Both of those things. The Coast Guard has been conducting a lot of anti-narcotic operations, and I'd just say that those should be strengthened and increased in volume. That'd probably be the most effective thing to do. And outside of that, the Gerald R Ford is underway now towards Venezuela, so very interesting to see the leave is over, and they're getting back to business. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Robert Betancourt, who puts in a 10. And Robert said, is there a civil air patrol in Europe? Cap anniversary is December 6, 1941.
Let's see. Civil Air Patrol. I think the Civil Air Patrol is only within the United States. Let me see here. Let's see here. About who we are, what we do. It doesn't really show all of their locations around the country. I would assume they probably don't have any in Europe, however, because I think that you have to be an American citizen to be a part of the Civil Air Patrol, I believe. But let's see here. Let me give it a little check here. Let me give it a little check here. Let me give it a little check here. Let's see here. Oh wow, they actually have let's see. Wow, they actually have uniform service pay grades in this thing? Huh. I didn't know that. Anyways, moving on from that. I'm trying to see here, folks, if I can find if they have any in Europe. I'm just thinking, though, that the simple answer is no. But I want to make sure that we do our due diligence on this. And it appears that the answer is no. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least the best we can. And a huge thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $6 super chat from 535 Medic. He said, stop all personal money transfers to India and add sanctions and offer minor military aid to Pakistan for spite. Honestly, we ought to do something. Like we ought to do some type of punishment toward India. I'm just not sure how willing the U.S. leadership is going to be toward doing that, considering the fact that they're trying to basically let Russia back into the global economy. So I'm not sure if they're going to be as angered and outraged about India buying Russian oil as we are, even though they should be. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree with Enforcer Matt on that. There should be something done, like we were saying earlier in the show. Now, I don't know if we will. Knowing our great and illustrious government and our glorious leader, they'll do nothing. So that's a little unfortunate, but we should do something in realistic practice. But a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 6 from Econ Professor, who said, Enforcer and Matt, thumbs up. And also, Enforcer and Matt, you two escaped the Confederacy also.
I suppose so. But I do thank you so much for the support. And I'll say this though, there were a lot of people that I had that are friends in Alabama. Like when we talk about Alabama, it's very easy to diss on it. There were positives to Alabama that made some silver linings to it. But I'm pretty happy to be out of there. I really wish, though, that I could have taken the friends that we have there and just kind of moved them out here with us. Sadly, we can't do that. But it would have been cool if we could have. That would have been very nice to pull off, but that's something we couldn't have done. But still, I have to say, I'm pretty happy to be out of there. But I mean, I don't know. It's not all the South isn't too terrible. I mean, unless if you include Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, most of Tennessee, except for kind of Nashville, maybe, and then South Carolina and most of Georgia, and then most of Florida, except for that one road in Miami on the beach. It's kind of okay. Like it's kind of all right. It's not too bad of a place. But still, a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, by the way, someone asked me, have you tried So Delicious out there in Utah?
I haven't tried that one, but I've tried Swig though, which is like the main one. Have we ever shown the people what that is, by the way, like what their actual drinks look like?
Yes, we have many times.
Let's show them that again. I want to show the people this in case somebody hadn't seen it. I want to show you all out here in Utah because of the Mormon faith that's very prevalent out here. They don't drink the coffee, so they drink the soda instead. So they've gotten creative with the soda. They take like a normal one, like Dr. Pepper or something like that, or a Mountain Dew, and they put like different things in it. Like they'll put strawberry puree in it. They'll put like coconut cream in it and things like that. And they turn them into like soda cocktails. They're actually pretty solid. Like I didn't think they would be that great, but they're actually very good. You wouldn't expect it, but it's actually very tasty. It actually tastes as good as it looks, believe it or not. I thought it was going to be underwhelming, but it's actually good. I didn't know you could actually make a soda taste completely different just by adding a couple things to it, but you really can.
And it's good. It's real good. I gotta say, folks, it's delicious. It's so good. It's so good. It's so tasty. That one's called a shark attack. I think this one's the spring fling. And Matthew, what's that one right over there on the right?
I honestly don't know. I hadn't memorized them really. I just got that one and tried it, but I don't know.
Man, shoot, we don't even know the names of them. But it is good. It is very good. They make them like cocktails. You would think that that would be gross, but it's actually quite tasty, quite good and delicious. And it's specifically a salty thing.
Also, Tom Exman said, it sounds like a lot of sugar right there. Also, Tia Beery said, too much sugar. I don't know, like the Mormons act like they don't, like they're maybe immune to diabetes or something. Like they just drank like sodas nonstop. I'm like, how in the world are they drinking these sodas like this? I guess maybe because they stay active, they're like burning off the sugar. I'm not sure if that's how it works. I've never gotten diabetes, so I wouldn't know. But they just like, they consume soda like there's no such thing as diabetes. I don't even know how they do it. I can't even stomach. Like the couple times I've gotten their soda cocktail thing from the store there, I haven't even been able to finish the whole thing. It's like drink half of it or something, and that's enough for me. I'm like, that's too much sugar.
On the other hand, I'm drinking that thing all the way. I'm just kidding, by the way. That would kill me. But I actually have a very low tolerance to sugar, folks. If I have any sugar, I get sick feeling like pretty quick. So I don't really drink a lot of sugar, but Swig is pretty good. I will admit the flavor is great. Outside of that, though, there's many cool things to look at around here in the Salt Lake City area, like
Indeed.
Riverton, and like Sandy, and like South Jordan, and like West Jordan. Not really Midvale though. And Cottonwood Heights, and Holiday, and Mill Creek, and not really Murray. Kind of. I haven't really been out here at West Valley City or Taylorsville or anything. I really don't know what those places look like. And then downtown Salt Lake's pretty interesting. I haven't really gotten out there a lot though, but I've heard it's pretty cool. Like and then Ogden's
There's a lot of
really
neat
neat.
stuff.
Yeah, just so much neat stuff. And then there's that mall, that Farmington Mall right here. This one's really cool, by the way, folks. Really, really neat. But anyways, folks, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cruder Dragon, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Cruder, for that support. He said, I'm grateful of the work you guys do each day and glad I found the channel and I learned much from you guys. And also that speech had me crying. And by the way, one of my favorite guns is the AN-94.
Oh, yeah, interesting. You go with a Russian prototype that was supposed to be good, and it was too good, and it was too expensive, so they never brought it in large numbers, but that's what it is. And it has a hyperburst feature. Do you know what that is, Matthew?
It fires fast.
It fires 2 rounds. Like if you put it on the hyperburst mode, when you pull the trigger, it actually fires 2 rounds that are so close in sequence to each other that the second one fires off before the recoil from the first round even hits your shoulder. So basically, you're able to get 2 rounds on target with your first shot, with the first pull of the trigger every time you fire the AN-94. So a pretty interesting sort of an idea. It's just that they never made a lot of these. As a matter of fact, from what we know, there's like only a couple of dozen of these that were possibly ever made, and then the project was canceled. But beyond that, thank you so much for enjoying the work we do, Cruda. And I also got to say, that speech was one hell of an inspirational speech. Zelensky makes a lot of inspirational speeches. Honestly, I got to say, if he ran for a political position in America, I think he could probably win it just because of the speech abilities, or the speech-making abilities that he has. Because I haven't heard any speeches like that recently. I've heard, it is the greatest, it is the biggest, or, look, Jack, you got under, are you good? Are you child of man on the moon. You know, and then you get those two, and that's nowhere close to what Zelensky's over there doing. Zelensky's over there going, I write poetry with my words. I speak about hype and real shit, like gang shit. But beyond that, a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Uncover Cube 7, who puts in a 5. And he said, thanks for always being my go-to news in the mornings for work. And I'm glad to be here live tonight in LOC.
And thank you so much for the support. And thank you for always being happy that we're live for you to hear on the commute and as the morning news. And we thank you greatly for always being here and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing a reality and keep it rolling. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one is going to go to Show Intel 2025, who puts in a 5. And he said, I hope you had your coffee tonight, and much love.
I didn't. I didn't have a coffee. I kind of got through it a little bit better tonight than last night. I think I'm getting used to this. But I do have more coffee filters on the way, so I should be getting coffee here soon. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Cachulian343, who puts in a 5. And Cachulian said, also creating jobs in south of the border gives them less reason to come here illegally in the first place. Just saying.
I mean, that's fairly true, you know, giving people some jobs to work. They ain't going to be coming here. But really, it's more so the Central American countries that do that. It's a misnomer in the public that it's Mexicans who are running across the border. It's actually more so Central American states, citizens that are running across the border. They actually go on massive migrations, basically, through Mexico to make it to the United States. Because I don't know what the logic of it is. The Mexican government also tries to stop them from ever really running away, so their only option is either to walk back to where they came from or just keep walking until they make it to America. That's something, honestly, that we kind of need to look into a little bit, is how in the hell to stabilize the Central American states south of Mexico. Because Mexico has a lot of crime because of the cartels and all, but it's way more stable than any Central American state, and it's a lot more prosperous. So we need to figure out how to balance out the other ones, and that generally will get rid of a lot of the migrational issues, or the immigration issues that we're having at the moment. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I mean, maybe we could take the industries and put them in Guatemala. Like, maybe we could. Like, that's a possibility. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Jason Curling, who said, thanks to the info and how Corgi get used to new house. And also the Corgis actually stayed behind in Alabama, actually. They stayed back behind with our parents. So they didn't come out here to Utah. They would love it out here in Utah, though. It's a lot of outdoor activities and things like that the Corgis would probably love to take part in. And also I've seen actually a good number of Corgis in Salt Lake City. Seems like they're a pretty popular dog out here, actually. So, yeah, they're actually behind in Alabama. We haven't seen them in probably a month and a half at this point. But, Enforcer, what say you?
Man, Mr. Corgi would be choking himself to death on the leash because he'd be so excited. And then you hear Sheba back there, man, and she'd be going, man, like trying to breathe, like it would be like, man, it would be terrible. Man, honestly, I would love to have them out here. I miss the dogs so much. I hope that one day they're out here really soon. But outside of that, because of how much we work and the schedule that we have, it would be impossible to have them and keep them with us. So they had to stay behind with their parents. But they should be coming out here at some point in the future. So they haven't had to acclimate to much of anything, but they have had some deals going on. Sheba had to get a surgery recently because there was a polyp that was kind of like developing behind one of her legs. So she had to get a surgery. Beyond that, Mr. Corgi's just vibing. I mean, Mr. Corgi's always vibing. He's just, you know, little wargy. But that's basically the situation with the pups. Sheba's fine, though, by the way, folks. Like, the surgery was nothing, like, threatening. It was just, like, some sort of weird, like, polyp that was growing on her. It wasn't cancerous. They removed it, and she's recovering from the surgery and healing up the stitches and everything. So she's perfectly fine. But we haven't had the dogs out here at all, unfortunately. Very sad, honestly. But a huge thanks to you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
We also had a $5 support from Bobo, and he said, I'm like In-N-Out Burger, leaving a do, no, and a like, and have a great night.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying In-N-Out Burger. We do too, and I hope that you have a great night as well. And a huge thanks to you so much once again, and we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Econ Professor, who puts in a 5, and they said, Enforcer Matt, welcome to the Rocky Mountain West from Montana.
Hey, and a big thank you for the welcome to the Rocky Mountain West. We're in the Rockies now. And I got to say, it's so exciting, folks, to know that we're out here in the Rockies. Isn't it cool? It's so cool. Oh, my God. It's really neat because I never thought I'd be around alpine-sized mountains in my life, and now we are. It's so cool. But a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a $3 support from Plazoth and a $3 support from Marc-Andre Burnett. And thank you to the both of you, the longtime channel legends, by the way, for that support. And we also have a 2 from Vic the Red. And he said, end all the visas from India and sanction them.
I would agree. And I also have to say, folks, now I'm not trying to say this in a domestic political perspective or anything, but why in the world do we have the H-1B visa thing? Because there are a lot of Americans out here in this country that have doctorates and bachelor's degrees in specific fields that are well qualified for these jobs that these companies are hiring for. And instead of these companies giving them to Americans that are now up to their necks in debt because they went to undergrad and graduate school to get these degrees to be qualified for these jobs, they're going to give them to someone else from a country like India who will accept the job and make less pay, and generally the companies are hiring them because they're paying them less. Now that seems fairly unfair to me, just to be entirely honest.
Because Americans, they're unskilled and untalented. Like the Americans don't know what they're doing. Like it's better to give the job to someone that knows what they're doing from India and let them come over here and reap the benefits of our economy that's done extremely well thanks to the Americans that built it. It would be better to let the people come over here and take the money back out of our country, take the money out of our economy, and take it overseas to an enemy state. It would be much better for that because Americans are too incompetent. Americans don't know what they're doing. They're unskilled. Vote for me.
Yay, he loves Americans.
Yeah.
Yay!
I wouldn't stand a damn chance of winning an election if I said that, but for some reason, some people do.
Some people do. Isn't that crazy, folks? And I remember something about, I don't know. It was like a year ago. They were saying something about, immigrants are stealing jobs, but apparently not all of them because some Americans are just too stupid to even have the jobs. That's just election talk. But beyond that, I will say, folks, that is quite annoying to me because I know loads of people, because I'm from the generation that just, a lot of them are graduating college or a lot of them are just getting done with their graduate degree right now, their doctorates. They are more than qualified for all these jobs, and there's not a single one to be had because of things like H-1B visas. I'll just be entirely honest with y'all. High skilled jobs like that, I understand that there is a deficit, even if we hire on nothing but Americans, for high-skilled labor in places like the medical industry where we need more doctors than we can even create right now through university. But still, Americans should always be prioritized, especially for high education jobs. Americans get nothing at all when it comes to subsidies for college. It's not like Europe where university is next to nothing and basically free if you want to go there. Americans have to go up to their necks in debt to be able to get a college degree. So why in the world are we going to sit here and screw over so many people, millions of them, by telling them that the only way they're going to get a job is to get a college degree? They go up to their necks in debt to get one, and then when they finally get one, we're going to sit there and tell them, I'll actually F you because you're wanting to get paid too much. We're going to go hire this guy from some third world country like India who will do the job for about $60,000 instead of $80,000 or $90,000 like you would, because he's going to be cheaper. That's screwing over a lot of people in this country. One, because they're not able to go and even pay off their debts. They're not able to get a job to even pay off their debts. And secondly, it's deprioritizing the citizenry in their own country for jobs that they are actually skilled in. Like if there's leftover jobs, more than happy to have H-1B visa workers come in and fill those jobs. But we need to make sure that there are Americans that are getting those jobs that are up to their necks in debt to get them in the first place.
Yeah. And also, by the way, I just want to make it perfectly clear that little rant I just went on a minute ago, I'm being sarcastic to make a point there. I'm a big believer, and this isn't really something political here, because unless somebody is, delusional or something, I'm not sure who the hell would think this. But if our young men and women are paying big bucks, like the enforcer is saying, to go to college, and then they get out of college and they're not able to find a job because their jobs are being filled by people that are on H-1B visas, that's obviously unjust and unfair. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see that's unfair. And also, honestly, these days, if parents are smart, they will tell their kids not to go get an undergrad degree unless they're planning on going to medical school or law school or something like that. You'd be much wiser to simply look for a job out of high school or decide to go into the trades, because these days college degrees don't pretty much get you anywhere.
Yeah, that's honestly true, and I see a lot of people talking about the whole topic of immigration. I'm not going to get into the giant rabbit hole of immigration in general, but I can't. I think everyone in the country can agree that the whole H-1B visa deal is an absolute ripoff to the public. Like not getting into everything else, because then that gets into the weeds and everyone has a completely different opinion. But I think everyone can agree that the H-1B visa deal is an absolute scam, and is an absolute. It's a messed up thing that not like it's a messed up thing, folks, because the last administration didn't do anything about it, and then this one said that they were going to do something about it, and then when they got into office, they didn't only not do anything about it, they then said that Americans were too stupid for those jobs anyways, so they ought to just not even pay attention to losing those jobs, when there's so many Americans out there that are well overqualified with doctorates and bachelors in multiple different topics and studies that actually are applicable in a real career field, and they're out there working at McDonald's, because there's no other
We got
jobs
several in
for
the
them.
chat. We got several in the chat right now that you're talking about, the ones that are like overqualified for jobs and yet they can't find work. Like they have all the degrees and experience in the world and they're literally sitting around waiting for a job to finally interview them or accept them for the position, one or the other, and they're not getting accepted. They're sitting around unemployed looking for work and they are overly qualified. Like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure how many people in the chat. I think most people in our chat are retired or they're not currently looking for work. I think it's a lot of people in the chat right now. But for the people that are looking for work, though, you'll know that the job market is busted, very bad. Like it's busted. It's hard to find a job. Like even if you are qualified, it's hard to find one.
Yeah, it's next to impossible. It's absolutely just messed up to hell. It's unbelievably messed up to the point that you like once you start to look into it, if you're retired and you remember the good old days, if you look into this now, it's unbelievably screwed up. Something has to be done. And it's not going to be done. It's not going to be done by anyone who's getting elected recently. I can tell you that. Like that's not even getting political. That's just the truth of it. I mean, the last administration didn't do anything about it, and this one isn't doing anything about it. I mean, they made it clear they're doing nothing about anything anymore with the economy at all. So basically the gloves are off. The economy will just beat the shit out of everyone, and the government's just going to sit back and let everyone get beat to death by the economy and just watch it happen. So that's what's going on, right? That's what's been going on really for the whole time we've been covering the news on this channel. But it's been made fairly clear that that's just going to be what it is for the next 3 years. On top of that, and then what's going to be crazy, folks, is that 3 years from now there's going to be another election, and both candidates are going to swear up and down that for both parties that they're going to fix the economy and they're actually going to make sure to prioritize Americans for jobs and so on. And then one of them will be elected, and then they won't do that probably either. So
Wanted to worry about it but they wanted to worry about it because in another 5 years or so, when AI actually does replace jobs, that's not a myth, by the way, because I'm not sure if y'all seen it, but the numbers are coming out that AI's already replaced like 12% of the entire jobs in the country. It's replacing jobs already, which is kind of surprising how fast it's doing that. In 5 more years, I think the job market could be even worse cooked than it is now because of how many jobs are being taken through automation, through AI. So it's going to be a lot more people being displaced. Also, a lot more layoffs are probably coming too. So people that are currently employed and think that they have a solid and stable, they'll probably be finding out unfortunately different thanks to companies deciding to prioritize profits over actually taking care of the people that's been working for them for years.
yeah, and I also saw someone talking about the minimum wage deal. Like, I gotta say, folks, like back in the day when I was a kid, I didn't really understand the whole minimum wage thing. Looking at it now, that is like, I'm not trying to get political here on the economic side of things, but the minimum wage has got to be raised. I mean, like, and people keep on saying that if you raise it, the prices will rise, and that's true. But at the same time, folks, people have got to understand the minimum wage has been getting raised ever since it was created originally, way back 120 years ago. It's always an endless battle between rising wages and then slowly rising prices that follow behind it. But that's what we have to do. We can't ever just sit there and go, you know what? We'll just keep it at this level and never change it, because it's going to be outpaced massively by eventual inflation, and then on top of that, it's also going to be outpaced by those rising prices, which are always going to be slowly rising. So Like, and I see some people saying no, prices will not increase. Well, historically they have, but it's generally because of inflation and also rising wages and a myriad of other factors. But but prices are always rising on everything, and as a result of that, the minimum wage also has to rise with that. And that's a continuous thing that the government has to work on and do. And if you don't believe me, you can go back and look at the U.S. Federal minimum wage throughout the whole of its history ever since it's been created. Because when it was created, it was supposed to be that the minimum wage was the minimum living wage that someone could make a living off of for themselves, not for a family, but just for themselves. And then over time, it's been whittled down to you can't even make a living for yourself at all, and you're practically still living with your parents on minimum wage. And then on top of that, the other issue with that is that the prices are still rising, either to match inflation, or they're rising because the wage is what it is, and they know that certain people can afford a certain amount of goods, and then it's not being adjusted as a result of that either. Either way, I think a lot of people can kind of be on board. The minimum wage does have to be raised these days, and by a good degree, because I mean, like, there's a lot of people out there, folks, and this is the other thing, because people always sit there and say the minimum wage is just for high school kids. There's a lot of people, folks, out there that are going to be in those jobs for the rest of their lives. Let's just be honest here. Some of these people are never going to make it farther than that. Should they always be having to live in like with four roommates in like a 1,400 square foot place or a 1,200 square foot place or an 800 square foot place for the rest of their lives? Like, is that really fair to them? This country can do better than that. We've done better than that in the past. I mean, hell, there was people back in the day that had penny ante jobs, and they were doing quite well for themselves. And I think that the country could do that again these days without a doubt. I mean, these days, by the numbers, we're supposed to be, in the terms of figures, more prosperous now than really ever. So it's like, why in the world could we not have that kind of life that people had in the 50s economically again today? And there is no reason that we couldn't.
It's a mindset problem. It's greed. It's a lack of compassion. Like, for example, when you have mega corporations that don't see people as people and they see people as numbers, and it's not like, I'm not trying to demonize. Like, for example, people want to demonize CEOs. They want to say, oh, it's that bastard CEO. If that bastard CEO wasn't in that position, then the people would be taken care of. No, that's not the case. It's the system, the system of the way corporations work. That's the problem, because the way it works is whoever's a CEO, they have to maximize profits. If they don't, then the CEO's out, and then they're in deep trouble. Then they're out of a job. So they'll just simply get rid of that CEO, and they'll bring in another one who's willing to do it, and he'll do it. So it's not one person. It's the whole mindset around it. It's not like small business where people actually know the employees in the company and things like that, and they take care of them, or at least presumably they're supposed to take care of them and think about them as real people. It's that most of these people don't even know, like in these corporations, they don't even know their employees. Like, all they see is like a name and a number on a sheet, and that's it.
And I also see someone saying increasing wages has historically did more harm to the economy. When? I mean, like, let me go pull up all the times. Let's see, minimum wage increases. Let me go find them, because there's been a gazillion of them. Let's see here, minimum wage increases over the years. Let me go get that. So, this is from 1938, when the federal minimum wage was set, and every single little increase here on this chart is a time when the minimum wage was increased. So if you look right here, in 1950, the minimum wage was increased significantly. In 1950. That was around the time that Eisenhower was elected. It was then significantly increased again in Eisenhower's second term in about 1957. It was then massively increased again under Kennedy in 61, and then again in 63, and then again in 67. I mean, look at how many times. Like, what's crazy, folks, is that when the minimum wage was around the 50s and the 60s, which people consider to be the most prosperous times in this country's history economically, there were minimum wage increases coming around about every single term that a president had, every 4 years or so. And the economy was doing just fine. I mean, nobody looks back at the 50s and the 60s when the boomers were alive and go, oh, they were living in a terrible economic time. I mean, it was a huge downturn because of minimum wage increase rises. No, these people were living high on the hog back then, and rightfully so. That's what we should always be shooting for in this country. And then you'll see that once we hit about 1983 or so, the minimum wage was never touched really, and then it completely dropped. And then in the 90s, there were two minimum wage increase bumps. And then around the time of 2010, there was one more minimum wage increase bump, and since then, there's never been another. It's been at $7.25 since around 2010. And if you look at the purchasing parity of $7.25 back in 2010 versus today, it is about half of what it even was in 2010. So it's really crazy, honestly, that we're not doing anything about this. Because it is something that historically, when it was first introduced, was being increased quite significantly. As a matter of fact, around the 1970s, minimum wage, adjusted for inflation by 2019 figures, was about $12 an hour. That's quite a decent amount. That's quite a decent margin.
Well, what's messed up is this. Here's like the huge overall summary of it. People are getting paid generally almost the same as what they got paid like back in the 1990s. They're getting paid something similar. If you don't get all into inflation and things like that, they're getting paid something similar. But the cost of living, though, has risen about 3 times higher. So you're getting paid the same thing, but it costs 3 times as much to live a comparable lifestyle in 2025 as it did in 1990. So your purchasing power has been reduced by a factor of 3. And on top of that, not only are you getting paid the same, but now employers have increased productivity of that worker by, I think it's like 10 or 15 fold. So they're doing like 10 or 15 times the work and consolidating multiple jobs into one position that guy holds. And then you're paying way more to live and you're making the same amount. It's just unfair as hell when you really look at it.
Yeah, I mean the chips are stacked against pretty much most people. And also I don't like the argument, folks, that people make, like the argument earlier that someone made. I forgot their name, but I'm not saying I don't like you. I'm just saying I don't like the argument where increasing the quality of life for the citizenry will result in reprisal actions by the people who are generally hoarding the money at this point economically. I don't really like the thought of that, because it's like, it's like, if that's the case, if they want to play that game, well, the government can play hardball with them too. If they want to start doing that, and that comes out in the job report, well, we can start looking into antitrust actions, bust their asses up quite nicely to teach them a lesson and set an example. Or we can start opening up lawsuits against them, or we could start seeing about passing some sort of a bill to allow for a fund that's provided by, say, a state or the federal government to investigate and prosecute any unlawful or what appears to be wrongful terminations or firings in these companies when such things like that happen. Those sorts of things could happen as well. Because I don't like the idea of the citizens of the nation, by the hundreds of millions, are pretty much at the mercy of people who want to screw them over and get the best performance out of these people as possible and give them nothing in return, when in reality, if it wasn't for everyone in this country together, from the top to the bottom, this nation wouldn't be possible. And I don't like the idea of one part of the country, one half of the country, as far as wealth, just shafting the other half and acting like they're completely worthless beyond their labor. That's just completely wrong. An honest day's work ought to have an honest day's pay. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ryan H. on Wheels, who puts in the 5. And he said, "Good evening, enforcers, and check out the Napoleon rabbit hunt of 1807 and LSA.
Oh my God, I don't have to check it out. I know that story. So Napoleon got bored, Matthew, and he wanted to hunt rabbits, but he also wanted to make sure that everyone got one. So he had a whole bunch of guys, rabbit breeders, come in and drop off rabbits. And they dropped off so many of them, man. I think it was like thousands of them or something, that they just started flooding over the field in a wave. I think they shot like 1 or 2 of them, and then they panicked, and they all went fleeing for the hills because these rabbits were literally about to pour over them like a wave and get them. So it's a crazy story, honestly, but I thank you so much for support. And honestly, you just told me about that. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I remember that. It's an insano story, but a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Econ Professor, who puts in 2 $5 supports. And thank you very much, Econ Professor, for that support as well. He said, corporate margins are the most money, AI said, and large corporation monopolies are eating the potentialities for small corporations and the startups too. And also, econ professor, small business in the country is basically dead. Like, it's not dead. Like, for example, Salt Lake City actually has small business that still exists. I was shocked to see that. They actually have a pretty strong small business base here, which is good to see. But anywhere else in most places around the country, I mean, megacorps have destroyed small business. And when small business disappeared, the middle class started disappearing. And then people were having to funnel into whatever job they could find at that point. And then the wages never got increased and the cost of living went up, and everybody started either being very rich or they started being poor, and the middle class disappeared. So the middle class exists somewhat today, but not nearly like it used to. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree. And I would say that the country needs to heavily support small businesses, because small businesses distribute make sure that the money keeps circulating in the same area, primarily than where it came from. So it generally ensures that people have a decent amount of expendable income to work with. And not only that, it also ensures that the employers know their employees and actually treat them like people instead of like statistics, which I think is a far better sort of position for people to be in. But a huge thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to C. Napier, who puts in a 2. And he said, cancel all H-1B visa programs.
I would generally agree with that. But a big thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Max Daniel, who puts in a 2. He said, I get only being treated nice regarding history, HW.
Oh, yeah, like if you were good at history, excuse me, do you know who Alexander Hamilton is? And then after that, they start treating you like crap again. But a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And it's now time to jump into our live chat questions and our Morse code decoders. Tonight, we had the roster of decoders: Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, as well as Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, Her Royal Fluffiness, Kush Cooper, Terry Siren, Brian Blairstown. And they said, the Morse code says, I got to say that it is something else that we keep seeing what's going on right now, an LLT, LSA.
And that is the sound of money. And that is dead on the nail. That is the Morse code message of the night. I got to thank you massively for getting that Morse code message correct. Y'all always get the correct. And Lee Springer of Cinema Core does their work well. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to move on into the third to last question of the night, because we are well over time.
All right, so this one right here is going to go to Uncovered Cube 7. You said, what is the downside of the U.S. not having a presence in the Baltics?
The downside is that the Russians practically run the show there, and there's really no one else there except for the Swedes, the Germans, and the Poles that could put up any resistance. So it greatly weakens our position, especially if the Baltics ever become besieged in the outbreak of a war, because we will have to clear out the Baltic Sea, which will take time, to then open up supply lines to the Baltics to even get forces into the region. So it's not a good position. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to One Wyoming, who is a neighbor to Utah, by the way. Thank you very much for that good question here. They said, I'm hearing that Moscow is in lockdown. Putin hasn't been seen in 11 days, and there's a communications blackout. And any info on this? Oh, and Putin's still there, by the way. He just showed up in India the other day, so he's there. And I don't think Moscow's on lockdown. I think that's maybe just a rumor or something. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, I think that's a rumor. And also, Putin is still in India at the moment, I believe. So it would be hard for him to be in Moscow at the moment. So I think generally most of that information that's saying that he hasn't been seen in 11 days and Moscow's on lockdown probably is coming from sources that may just be trying to stir up some drama to get some clicks and some views. But I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Old Warrior. And Old Warrior said, there are reports that the Belgian Prime Minister stated today that Russia cannot be beaten and will take down Belgium after they beat Ukraine. And do you have any news to confirm that?
Can you reread that one again?
Yeah, it said there are reports that the Belgian Prime Minister stated today that Russia cannot be beaten and will take down Belgium after they beat Ukraine. Do you have any news?
I didn't hear about that personally. I had to have that reread because it was crazy. I was like, what? I'm not saying you're crazy for saying. I'm just saying that I didn't hear that today, and I was like, that's crazy news to me. I didn't hear that today. I'll have to look around and see if that was even said. If something like that was said, though, it would have crossed our radar, and it didn't. So I'm kind of doubting that was said. But I'll look into it and see. I'll try and make sure. But with that, I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative to have had so many people here with us tonight. And I mean a lot of people. Over the course of the entire stream, we had 11.4 thousand people here at the peak. And 90,000 people have watched this stream before it ended, which is actually quite a large amount of people. We got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying this channel and considering it to be your primary source of news. And we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And of course, folks, we're going to be running our Sunday night fundraiser. And so with that, we will see you all then. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe. Slava Ukraini, Ram Slava. Long live the Lee Spring Army and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, thank you all to the 90,000 plus people that joined us tonight. That's a lot of people here tonight. We do appreciate every single one of you for choosing us as your news source, as always. And we will see you tomorrow midday on that short war video. If there is enough news to cover, I'll be making that video tomorrow if there is enough news. And we will see if there is stuff happening in the early part of the day that lets me make that video. Because we've had a good video that came out yesterday. We want another one tomorrow if there is enough news. But with that, folks, we'll see you all on the stream definitely tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern to do the next Sunday night fundraiser stream, and we'll see you all then. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.
To God.